When did you convince everyone that you were, in fact, an actual wizard? While standing directly in front of one of 5 elevators at work, I was asked, "What makes you think it's going to be that one?" To which I responded very seriously, "I always know." Right as the doors opened, and it made me look like some sort of Jedi. One time I had a girl in my car that I really liked and wanted to impress. Now this was in the late 1980s when CD players in cars were really new. I had a custom installation that worked pretty well, but it had some flaws. In particular, I had to hit the play button whenever I turned on the car. Then the amp wouldn't kick in for about 30 seconds for some reason. So I was in the habit of hitting the play button ASAP as I turned on the car so the tunes would start up. So we got in my car, a Mustang convertible at the time, and as usual I hit the play button as soon as I started the car. But having done this literally hundreds of times, I was very fast and fluid at it, and the girl didn't even notice that I'd done that. So we pull away, driving down the Pacific Coast Highway in Southern California along the ocean, as I recall. So the girl says, "Hey, how about some music?" I knew the amp was about to kick in, so without even glancing at her, I snapped my fingers in front of the CD player, and the timing was perfect. The music immediately started up. My expression never changed, like I expect magic things to happen at the snap of my fingers all the time. She just stared at the CD player, stared at me, and then just shook her head with a little laugh. I felt like the smoothest king of the smooth people. On the tennis court, I'm about 3 courts away from the basket of tennis balls when I take a ball out, say loudly to my friend, "And now I will take this ball and I will serve it into the basket." I toss the ball up and hit it in the general direction of the basket. That crap goes straight into the basket like a guided missile. The look on his face as I was elevated to godlike status was amazing. We were jumping around a little bit after that. Once I sneezed in class and the lights went out. I was whacking the old mule once and this happened right as I arrived at my destination. For this reason, I've refrained from having relations with any women due to the obvious might of my climaxes. At least, that's what I tell myself. Thank you for writing in, and thank you for your sacrifice. Your celibacy is the only thing standing between your city's power grid and complete destruction. I was sitting in my brother's apartment and this big fly came buzzing into the room. He said, "That frickin' fly has been driving me crazy for 2 days." Before he'd even finished saying it, I reached into the air and grabbed the fly. Then, without saying a word, walked over to the window and let it go outside, sat back down and continued the conversation. Cook dropped a plate of food and I managed to catch it before it hit the ground without a single piece of food falling from the plate. Graceful like a swan, motherfricker. Swans are loud, awkwardly long-necked honking beasts which reportedly taste delicious. I have never understood why they're the symbol of grace. When my son was about 8 years old, I Jedi mind-tricked him to sleep. It was about 2:30 in the morning and he was very angry and very tired. I said, "Noah, it's time you went to sleep," and I waved my hand in front of his face. As soon as my hand went over his face, he was asleep. It was amazing, but my wife didn't believe me when I told her the next morning. Sometimes I pick up the phone and fix problems instantly. For example, "Hello, CIT service desk, how can I help?" "Oh, hi, sorry, what's the issue?" "Oh, don't worry, it works." "Okay, thanks." I worked in an arcade for a while, and this effect was localized to one single game tech named Larry. When the machines would break down without explanation, we would all spend hours tweaking around with them. Sure enough, Larry would walk over and start it up without incident. Those machines would then be marked with an AOL sticker, standing for Afraid of Larry. I feel like this is going to be pretty common, but I always try to guess where the train doors are going to stop, or subway or similar railed vehicles. I'll pick a spot and stand next to the platform edge, and when the train comes whooshing up, everyone does that slow shuffle towards where it looks like the nearest door will stop. When it works, I end up with a sudden crowd around me and the center of the doors right in front of me, without moving a muscle. I mean, I doubt anyone notices or cares, but I take significant satisfaction in it. I was in 9th grade and I'd just gotten a digital watch. I spent an unhealthy amount of time making sure that my watch was perfectly synced to the school's clock, which was displayed on the classroom's television mounted in the corner. Since that clock didn't show the seconds, I'd sit there, watch in hand, waiting for the moment the minute number jumped forward. When it did, I would immediately alter the time on my watch as well. So one day during English class, we were talking about when we get to get out of class. I don't know why, but the discussion got kind of heated for such a stupid subject. One kid was adamantly insisting that we wouldn't get out for at least 2 minutes, but I know, from glancing at my watch, that we were going to get out in 12 seconds. I told him that and he just scoffed. so I started counting down. 5, he just laughed at me. 4, people stopped talking and looked at me. 3, students started rotating in their seats to look at the time. 2, I started to get nervous. What if I was wrong? 1, silence within the area we were sitting in, butterflies in my stomach, the kid's expression suddenly turning nervous. And then a half second after, I started panicking about being wrong and never living this down when the bell rang. I used to be a goalkeeper at high school. I'm from Brazil. Me and my fellow teammates, my friends, were joking and playing with the soccer balls before a match, and for some reason I was doing fake karate kung fu stances and moves. I was facing the goal. Most of my friends were behind the goal, and did a punch move only to repel an incoming ball my friend kicked to hit me in the back. It was pretty sweet. Whenever a new person gets into my car, at some point during the drive I'll start singing some random classic oldie song. Then I give my passenger the old, "watch this" look, as I change the radio to the oldie station as if I knew the song I was singing would be playing. This has worked for me once in my entire life, and damn it did I feel like an absolute legend. The best one I've ever seen was done by my dad. Mom, Dad, and I were standing in the kitchen having a conversation. Dad casually reaches up and pulls a plate out of the cabinet, not in any hurry, turns to me, finishes a sentence, reaches out into midair over the toaster completely unprompted, toast pops up, Dad snatches the toast out of midair, takes the most satisfied bite I've ever seen and strolls off like a champ. And yeah, the most popular comment I'm getting is, "What toaster do you have that shoots toast up into midair?" This would have been in the mid-90s sometime. The toaster was an older model. The toast did not shoot into the air but did spring up suddenly. Toast can catch a little air this way, which is precisely what happened, and Dad had his hand over the toaster such that he caught it at the apogee of its path without needing to wait for it. Using the London Underground cards while they were hidden in my glove. You can tell when a red light is about to turn green by looking at the "don't walk" light lateral to it. It begins to flash right before the light changes. When I'd be at a red light when my kids were little, I'd hold out my hands and say, "green," and it would turn. And they thought I was a god. And now they roll their eyes at me. I was walking through the 7-Eleven with my friends one day when for some reason a small package of food started to fall off the shelf next to us. Without thinking or turning my head, I instantly reached my hand out and the package landed perfectly in my hand. I am Spider-Man. I dodged a paintball once, Matrix style. I leant back as I saw it coming and it flew gracefully over my head. Then I got shot in the family jewels. But for a third of a second, I was God. Kinda feels like the realistic outcome of what should have happened in The Matrix 2, to be honest. I mean, it wouldn't have been nearly as cool, but I would have died laughing in the cinema. That dumb agent just had to go for the thigh and get a gloat in. One of my friends had just started dating one of the cool car dudes at my high school. Me being more of a lame nerd girl, I had a bit of a hard time fitting in with this new crowd, especially since my knowledge of cars was very sparse. Well, one evening as the big group of car dudes and a few of my girl buddies met up, I felt utterly misplaced. One of the boys started telling a tale of woe about a part of his engine, no idea which, so don't ask, that had gone missing, and judging by the solemn mood of his crew, it nearly felt like a relative had died. Suddenly, one of my friends pipes up, "Vira can find it. She does that. She's totally magic." All eyes on me. What she was speaking of was my little parlor trick and knack of guessing where people put their stuff based on what I know about them. Absolutely not magical, but a fun trick that I thought would stay between us girls only. I was probably 50 shades of whooped butt in the face when I figured out I should just go for it. Nothing could really go bad. They couldn't ignore me more than they already did. During the evening, I'd observed that this guy was clumsy, slightly dazed, and preoccupied. He'd dropped at least 3 things on the floor in just a couple of hours, and he'd forgotten to buy snacks, and he always asked, "Huh?" after someone spoke to him. So I said, "You tossed it out. In a garbage bag near where you work on your car," I said with more confidence than I felt. As it was his house, he left to go to the garage and came back holding a bag. A black garbage bag. And I'm not bullcrapping you, it was in there. The whole room oohed and awed, and no, I didn't get off with the hottest bloke there, nor suddenly become less nerdy. But after that, they didn't ignore me. To them, I was cool. And I didn't mind letting them think I was magic, because to be honest, I frickin' felt magic. In short, a story in which I Sherlock some cool car dudes. I went to instant message one of my friends and for some reason decided to start the conversation with, "That's what she said," completely out of the blue. Apparently, he was typing a complaint about his work to me at the same time, so literally less than a second after I hit enter, my friend sent, "Man, this is so hard." For about 6 lines after that, I kept writing random lines and they all worked. It was something like, "That's what she said. Man, this is so hard. Because I'm a wizard. How did you do that? Creepily awesome. Okay, that's creepy. What the frick?" And then he logs off. It only ever happened once, but once was enough. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Once I was hanging out at a friend's house, imbibing substances and alcohol and enjoying the subtle nuance of Guitar Hero. A reasonable-sized group of us were there that night. I was wailing away to At the Drive-In's One-Armed Scissor. My friend Rocky was on bass. When I asked my twin sister, who was somewhere behind me, "What's the greatest thing in the world?" Cookies?" she responds. For a moment, I don't acknowledge what just happened until the solo came in. It's a rather simple solo, so I was able to rest my plucking hand and just tap that crap out. I didn't consider this some brave feat until Rocky looked at me with the respect eyes and expressed his envy and considerable impression. As I was tapping that solo out, my newly freed hand reaches into my pocket and pulls out its contents. As it happens, it's some small package of Oreo cookies. I throw this package behind my shoulder to my sister to the utter amazement of the group. Since that day, my friends regard me with the suspicion and mistrust due to a wizard. At a friend's party and everyone's having a good time. I'm practicing through the Fire and Flames on Expert on Guitar Hero. No one's paying attention to me, but someone calls my name from the adjacent room. The solo is playing, but I practice this song twice a day, so I go into the kitchen to see who called my name. My friend was just wondering where I was, but I hear behind me, "Who the frick is playing Guitar Hero?" I walk back into the room with everyone staring at me because I only missed one note for the whole 20 seconds of the solo that I was gone for. I didn't think I'd memorized it. When I'm too lazy to get up to get something, I'll just say, "The Force will get it for me," and be annoying about it. Eventually, a friend will just bring it to me, to which I reply, "The Force has a strong effect on the weak-minded." I'm the mother of a toddler, a 3-year-old, and anybody with kids can tell you that this will hone your reflexes to a sharp point. I can catch dropped objects in an instant without looking, much like Jolie in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is only particularly impressive when the dropped object is a full drink, but whatever. I'm also an expert at dodging thrown objects and navigating Lego-strewn rooms with amazing speed and agility. Oh, and the whole "Mum has eyes in the back of her head" thing? It's because you learn to hear that crap. I can hear the snack container in the pantry being opened from the laundry room with the washer and dryer running, so don't even try it. I stare at traffic and say, "Start moving now." It hasn't worked yet. My day will come. I used to work for Adopt-A-Pet as one of those annoying guys you hate collecting money for the shelter on street corners. We always worked with partners in 3s or 4s covering all parts of the intersection, and one day when the workday ended and we were heading back to the van to head back home, I legitimately just felt something off and I grabbed the girl I was walking with when she was about to cross the street, in a crosswalk with a sign reading "Walk" and the light red. Just then around the corner sped an SUV and several police cruisers that would have absolutely pancaked her. She was quite grateful. I was telling a story to some friends and another friend wanted me to shut up, so he threw a closed Swiss Army knife at my head from a direction I wasn't looking. Right at that moment I was moving my hand in the "these are not the droids" motion, and I blocked it. I didn't even slow down the story. I finished it and just looked at him. Definitely not the best, but worst. Still, Jedi. So I was hanging out with a new friend, I was a freshman in high school, that I had just met that semester. She was funny, cute, and happy. Well, one day we're over at a friend's house, jumping on his trampoline, when we go in for some lemonade. We're sitting around laughing, and she gets a phone call. We hush up so she can hear. Her face goes from chill happiness to a straight face. She hangs up the phone. I look at her and say, "What's the matter? Your grandma die?" She couldn't hold it in. Tears burst and she booked it out of the room. Her grandma had just died, and I made a joke about it. Impressive, but probably not cool. I can hypnotize chickens. Congratulations, you're the one superhero less impressive than Aquaman. But don't worry, if you become a Batman villain, you're still in the middle of the list in terms of awesomeness. Calendar Man, the Condiment King, and Armless Tiger Man ain't got nothing on you. I was driving in the car listening to XM radio. I told my friend what the next song was going to be, and it came on. I was pretty shocked myself. The summer I was 18, I was a lifeguard at a swimming pool. One day, me and my colleagues got wind that Sum 41 would be performing in a nearby city. I was an avid fan at the time, and so I made up my mind to go. Little did I know, 2 of the girls I worked with were also fans and managed to book off the date. We didn't have a lot of staff, and so because they booked off before me, their request was accepted and mine wasn't. A few weeks go by, and the day before the concert, the girls thought it would be in good taste to come and tease me about it. Ha 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 ha, have a good day at work tomorrow. Crap like that. I was annoyed, but a good enough sport not to take it to heart. So I answered, "You're going to get there and they won't even play. Something terrible is going to happen, just to rain on their parade." Sure enough, Sum 41 cancelled their performance due to the lead singer injuring his back. Next time we all worked together, it was as if I was personally responsible for the accident. In short, I accidentally cursed Sum 41. One time I perfectly predicted the Simpsons couch gag. It was the Monty Python foot one. Just as the couch comes into view, I say, "Foot," and like magic, the foot comes down, crushing the Simpsons family. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it was circa 1970. A bunch of us were doing some acid. I went to Longwood Gardens near Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. It's a huge former DuPont summer estate that's now a botanical showplace. The greenhouse is spectacular, with more plants from more different climates and environments than you can imagine. Taking green herb or whatever and going there was one of our favorite pastimes. It was just so pleasant and so cool. Anyway, there we were, 6 or 7 of us, both genders, wandering around all messed up, and we came upon a water fountain. It was like marble or something coming out of the marble or something wall. Everyone was thirsty as heck, but nobody could find the device for making the water come out. There was no handle, no button, no lever, nothing. Just a marble block with a stainless steel basin and a spout. Now, keep in mind we were all corked out of our gourds. I noticed that there was a metal round thing on the floor near the fountain. I surreptitiously slid my foot over it and said, "Watch this." I uttered some incantation as I waved my hands around in the air, then finished with a flourish, pointing to the water fountain as I applied just the slightest pressure to the thing under my foot. Water came shooting out of the fountain. I wish I could even begin to describe the reactions of my friends. It's impossible. I did it several more times and they got further and further mind-effed to the max. Talk about going bat-crap crazy. That's all. After a few times I revealed the secret. Watching their relief was almost as funny as watching their minds come unraveled. I was talking to the guy next to me in lecture one day, before class started, just chatting about how the class was going. Moments before, the guy in front of my seat propped his guitar against his seat and left the room. For the bathroom or vending machine, I assumed. It should be noted that I had the aisle seat. Paying no attention to his guitar and still talking to the dude next to me, I suddenly see something falling sideways in front of me and into the aisle. Without thinking, I quickly propped my leg up and caught his guitar on the lower portion of my shin. It would have hit the aisle stairs pretty hard. I put it back against his seat and gathered myself. He came back right as the lecture started, so I never mentioned it, which made it look like I do these kinds of things fairly often. I felt pretty ninja until I had to start taking notes. When I was about 10 years old, I once called and rolled 3 double sixes in a row in Monopoly. I think that's a 1 in 46,656 chance. In a game of Warhammer 40k, I witnessed 25 out of 26 dice rolled simultaneously, all coming up as 1s. Playing Super Smash Bros. With friends, 2v2, and my partner was out and I had 1 life left. 2v1 basically meant that there was no chance. I was playing with Captain Falcon, who I'm terrible at, and they had a combined 3 lives and were both historically far better than me. I said sarcastically, "How much do you want to bet I can win with just Falcon punches?" And 5 minutes later, I accepted my $20. Still to this day, don't know how I pulled it off. Dead lighters. When I say a fake prayer to the fake god of lighters, very solemnly, and then try to light it, 9 times out of 10, it ignites just the once to light my cigarette. Then when I hand it back to its frustrated owner, it doesn't work again. It sounds cool, but I've actually discovered it annoys the crap out of people. I was at a mall once, and there was this old bingo number picker machine thing on display. You know, you turn the crank, and all of the balls with the bingo numbers shuffle around until one gets picked. A girl I was friends with was turning it and told me to guess a bingo number. I guessed the first number that came to mind. It was like I-20 or some crap like that. Sure enough, when the balls fall out of the cage and she reads it, it was I-20. She was amazed. 1 month later, I started dating her. In short, guessed a bingo number correctly. Resulted in wooing a girl. I was in Las Vegas with a few friends and we were walking around the casino floor looking for a game to play. We were passing a roulette wheel when I stopped and was staring at the number board of previous spins. I do this for about 2 to 3 spins, then quickly put down money on one of the thirds. The spin ends, I win $600 and casually keep walking. I speak the dialogue in movies and TV shows before I've heard it. So much of it is so predictable, setups that line up a mile away. There is a well-known saying that goes, "Always give the hardest job to the laziest person because they will find the easiest way to do it." What is the best real-life example of this you have seen? I was once a temp at a tiny office on a construction site in around 2003. I was only there for 1 day while the regular person was on some training. They sat me down and told me that I just needed to copy all these numbers from one program to another. So I selected them, hit Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. Turns out about 60% of this woman's time had been manually typing the numbers from one place to another. I work in finance at a large multinational corporation. I feel like a big part of our job is just stop doing things and wait to see who complains. If someone complains, we keep doing it. If silence, then we call it a controlled drop and put it on our performance review for creating efficiencies. I worked in a CNC shop. There would be a pile of jobs that needed to be done for the month. Some took days to run, while others were generally quick. The record for jobs done in 1 day was 8. What I did was looked through all the jobs and organized them by setup, meaning every job has a setup time. Can take an hour to get all the tooling together, setting up the cutting table, and setting the parts square to the table so the machine can gauge where the part is. So when I insert the code into the machine, it can run flawlessly and drill, mill, tap, whatever within literally hair measurement, for every single job. Majority of parts use standard tooling, and I have automatic tool changing with 20 pockets. Long story short, I figured out how to line up jobs so they all have the same setup. Blew the record out of the water with 30 jobs done in 1 day, saving the company tens of thousands of work hours. All because I didn't feel like doing all the setups that day. I worked at a summer at a mortgage company as an assistant to the underwriters. My only job was printing documents and then hole punching them to put in folders. They had a super fancy Xerox printer that basically did my entire job for me, but the underwriters at this company didn't know how to click through printer settings to make the machine hole punch as it was being printed. I showed them how to do it, and they resisted it super hard. Like they didn't trust it, I don't know. So I got to keep my job, but what was supposed to take me all day literally took me 20 to 30 minutes first thing in the morning. So they started assigning me real tasks and even offered to keep me on to eventually become an underwriter too, because I was so sharp. I.e., I knew how to use the very expensive printer they already had. I was just about to start grad school, so I had to politely decline, but I'm pretty sure they didn't hire someone to replace me when I left. In conclusion, they had a printer that already did my job for me, but didn't know how to use it. I showed them. Maybe not the most impressive story here, but I thought it was a great sidestep of effort nonetheless. Coworker of mine had to get rid of smaller junk fiberglass boat with no trailer. Our other coworkers are all telling him how much time and money he's going to need to get rid of it, and he's just saying, "Oh, is that so?" He took off one day and sat down on his lawn with a cooler of beer. That day was garbage day. Inevitably, the trash guys rolled up. He hands each of them a cold beer and says, "Hey boys, got $50 for each of you if you help me out real quick." They fed the entire 12-foot boat into the packer, crushing 2 feet at a time. I used to process HSA claims around 10 years ago. One system we had to use back then was an old-as-hell terminal program that took 4-line items per page. That's it. For a usual claim, no big deal. Not too hard to keep track of things over 2 to 3 pages for a longer claim. Most fit on 1. However, we had the dreaded shoebox claims. This was the person who saved up every receipt all year in a metaphorical shoebox and sent everything in once a year to empty their account. We hated them. Dozens or hundreds of line items totaling thousands of dollars. Just because you only have $500 in your HSA doesn't mean we get to stop there. If you sent in $4,000 in receipts, I've got to account for all of it. Totally killed your numbers for the day, and they tracked claims per hour religiously. The main issue was double-checking that everything added up right when you were done entering it. At 4 items a page, it took forever to tally. So I made an Excel sheet. It was laid out so I could enter every single line, then run a macro that would calculate the needed totals and dump all the text to a text file formatted exactly, so I could select 4 items at a time and paste them directly into the terminal window from the default starting cursor positions, and every field would fill in automatically. Copy, paste, next, copy, paste, next, copy, paste, next, etc. It easily halved my entry times with way less work. Finding any typos was much easier. I just had to look at one column organized sheet instead of scrolling through God knows how many pages of terminal text. It was great. I showed it to my manager so the rest of my team could use it. She was horrified I would use something like that, as no human was double-checking as they went along. This despite demonstrable improvements to my error rates on large claims after I started using it. She ordered me to stop using it and forbid anyone else in her team from automating any part of their job at all. I kept using it for all of the 2 months I stayed there after that. I had some of the highest claim per hour numbers and lowest error rates on her team. I never developed any more tools for them. Flip her. I wonder if this individual ever got found out, but hopefully if they have, their results speak for themselves. Worked as a cashier during the holiday season back when I was 16. The supermarket was selling drinks by the boxes, and at that time we only had barcode scanners that was at the front of the computer. No gun-type scanners existed. I was lazy and didn't want to carry boxes up to the scanner, so I politely asked the customers if I could carve out the barcode from their box to scan and keep. Some agreed, some didn't want to, but eventually I managed to amass all the barcodes needed, labeled them and kept them in a file for easy reference. Apparently, some other cashier got green-eyed at my smart move and complained to the chief cashier, who promptly lectured me on, bullcrap alert, how it's dangerous for me to scan such barcodes as I might scan the wrong things. She told me to throw it all away and carry the boxes like I was meant to. I mean, I was young, so I could, but the other cashiers were older and some were elderly and needed the customers themselves to help carry the boxes to the scanner. But whatever, I guess jealousy trumps common sense. Was a temp. Got hired for the day to print 30 packets with 100 pages each. Why would it take a day? I asked. Our printer doesn't collate the pages, so it will take you the day to sort the pages into the 30 packets, they said. Right. It was a standard office Xerox printer. It took me all of 30 seconds to find and click the collate button, clicked the staple button while at it. All got printed by itself into a nice stapled packet, and I got paid to browse internet for the day. They thought I was a genius for fixing their printer and gave me glowing recommendations to the temp agency that led to more jobs. Well, there's our second just use the feature included in the office equipment story for the day. Funny that. At my last job, a truck suspension shop, we did inventory every December and it was someone's job to count out all the washers and screws of every size. It was my first inventory and I casually mentioned that they should just weigh one screw or washer, then weigh them all and divide the weight to get the count. Everyone looked at me like I had given them the key to the universe. Counting washers and screws went from a day or two to just a few hours. Herding yak with a drone takes the cake for me. They run from it and oddly fear it, which is surprising considering they have literally 0 aerial predators. We only did it a few times because it really makes them uneasy and it doesn't treat them well. But it is very effective and easy, and you can herd them from over half a mile away from inside the house. Automated 70% of my job in a large finance firm as an intern. Never disclosed it and got easy money for 6 months. I spent the time doing courses and applying for my grad school. Got my admission letter during the final 2 weeks of my internship and never looked back. Pro tip, Python and Excel can be your best friend. Worked in a huge hotel by the airport. We had a layover with over 400 people. I think we were 3 employees. They had buffet for dinner and then left to go to bed since it was 1 or 2 a.m. Rule was we should always go to the room and pick up as many plates as we could and then bring them to the cleaner. Took us ages and I wanted to go home. I decided to roll out the cart and collect the plates and put them on the cart. Guests were seeing it and started putting their plates on the cart when they left. All of a sudden, hundreds of people cleaned up their own stuff. Duty manager saw it and I thought he would blast me since the hotel was a 5-star place. He just looked at me, smiled and said, "That's why I like to hire lazy people. They think of ways to finish work faster." I have an example of how the truly lazy will sabotage tracking so no one knows stuff is broken. There was this guy at a software company that does integrated software systems. He hated his boss at his job and apparently most of his team. Every time he was assigned a bug to fix, he would mark it resolved and assign it a no-reply email address associated with the team. The odd thing that I don't understand is how he managed to keep issues from getting escalated to other real people. At any rate, no one caught on. When he found a new job and a couple of people on his team took him out for drinks, he said, "You should look back into all the bugs I fixed. I never did any of that." So the guys who took him out for drinks went back and audited his work and were like, "Holy F! Not only did he do nothing, he hid identified issues for like a year." Must have been an EA Games dev. Was tiling a bathroom floor. One young guy I was working with was cleaning up when we were done. I told him to take the leftover tile downstairs to the truck, and then went back to cleaning what I was doing. 10 seconds later, I hear this huge crash and then a soft, "Oh, right." He had gone out onto the balcony and dropped them down into the truck, shattering over $100 worth of tile. He said he thought it would be faster. He wasn't wrong. I'm in corporate accounting, and I'm the only one in my department with a CPA. Of course, I have to take continuing education for my license, and I usually take as many hours of Excel courses as I can each year. By learning the keyboard shortcuts, advanced formulas, and a bunch of useful hidden features in Excel, I'm able to get most of my work done in less than 2 hours, then spend the rest of the day browsing Reddit and watching YouTube videos. Thank goodness our cubicle walls are high, or I'm sure they would have fired me by now for being on my phone 6+ hours a day. I look back at my time in corporate accounting and often realize just how much effing around I did at work, with literally no consequence. Other than month-end close, I feel like I sat on Reddit a solid 4+ hours a day. If I had improved my Excel to the point of knowing how to write macros, I would have been on 7/8 of the day. It made a lot of sense why the company I worked for decided to push for job documentation for 2 years, and then outsourced the work to offshore accountants. Sometimes I wish I was still in that job, and some days I'm very, very happy that I changed careers. There's a story that I've heard a few dozen times about a toothpaste company that had accidentally sent out cases of their product that had a few empty single boxes of toothpaste. The company had endeavored not only to rectify their mistake, but to ensure they did not repeat it. They hired an engineering company that designed a scale and an alarm shutdown system. If an empty carton was passed down the production line, klaxons would be triggered and a full stop would initiate until the offending box was recovered and an all clear had been entered into the computer system before production could resume. The company paid through the nose, but was ultimately pleased with their failsafe, and the engineers patted each other on the back. A few months pass and the engineers returned for quality control. The toothpaste company reported zero margin of error for weeks. Turns out, one of the minimum wage hairnet types on the assembly line didn't appreciate the sound of klaxons or working with the computers, so he or she had aimed a large fan at the production line before the scale that blew the lighter, empty cartons off the conveyor belt. Problem solved. Amazing. By teeing off the regular workforce with annoying alarms, the engineers motivated the factory workers to solve the problem themselves, after several thousand in R&D into the scale system. During my internship, my professor gave me line graphs on paper and asked me to find the coordinates by drawing horizontal and vertical lines. It would have taken hours, if not days. I thought to myself, I couldn't be the first one who is lazy AF. So I googled it, found this cool free-to-use software, Web Digitizer. Step 1. Scan the graph. Step 2. Mark the X and Y axes in the picture. Step 3. Grab a beer because you've got the nicest mother-flipping graph you couldn't have drawn yourself in a million years. My professor was so happy, she asked me to document the method and mail it across the entire department. Yes, I did share my original method with my professor and the entire department. 1, she was a really supportive professor, and I wanted to return her favors, even if the software might have been the tiniest help to her work. 2, the original developer of the software made it available online for free. He could have made it a paid service, and believe me, researchers would have paid because it is that good. But he kept it free for all of us to use, and it was my responsibility to share his work as much as I could. Got hired into a plant that just got a new big job building stuff for the military. My job was materials associate, which basically meant I drove a forklift and staged parts that were built. The engineers came up with a floor plan for all the parts and where they needed to be staged. They used fancy lasers and measuring devices and built it all in CAD. After telling them it wouldn't work, they said, "Well, let's see you do a better job." I organized the 50,000 square foot warehouse so that each part was close to the machines that used them. It followed the first in, first out method, and each department knew where their parts went when they were done making them, by putting up signs and whatnot. After that, my job was basically pointless because the warehouse ran itself. I decided to teach myself how to use the welding robots in my downtime. Fast forward 3 years and now I'm an automation engineer at one of the largest parts suppliers in the industry. P.S. Robots are very easy to learn and operate if you're struggling to find what you want to do in your career. Places are hiring with minimal experience too because there is a lack of people in the automation field. Get a 1-year college certification in mechatronics and you can make around $40,000 to $60,000 starting, depending on location. Back when I was a cashier at Borders, we had to keep a certain percentage of Borders rewards transactions. I was good at my job and was able to get into the high 80s, low 90s every month by being a good salesman and convincing them to get it. There was another guy I worked with that had an insanely high percentage, and I didn't understand how he did it. We later came to find out that he would just swipe a card and put it into people's bags without saying anything about it. He got caught and was given a warning and put on probation instead of being fired for cheating. Fast forward about a month and I find out he's getting promoted to work on the floor with all the movies and stuff. I could not believe they promoted him after all that stuff and looked me over, someone that was actually a hard worker that did a really good job and often would have people compliment me to my managers. Then again, the management there was crap. I eventually got fired from there because the guy covering for me while I was on vacation got fired, and they somehow expected me to know and come in. In high school, we do 4 book reports every year. A friend of mine did his on each Lord of the Rings book and The Hobbit freshman year, and turned in the same 4 book reports for the rest of his time in high school. You switched English teachers every year, so nobody ever caught on. I was never brave enough to try the same thing. I once ordered a painter to paint my bathroom walls. His price was pretty extortionate for the small job, and he only had a relatively small brush to complete it. It was a pretty lousy paint job because of the small brush, so a few weeks later I finally convinced myself to get another painter, but just a cheap one to go over the bad job done by this other guy. Instead of using just a brush, he had a huge roller, and consequentially got the job done much quicker. He did a great job and charged significantly less than the other guy. Lee from Lee's Painting, wherever you are, thanks. I was once on a US military ship having breakfast in the wardroom, the officer's lounge, when the operations officer, OPS, walks in. This guy was the definition of not a morning person. He's still half asleep, bleary-eyed, basically a zombie with a bagel. He sits down across from me to eat his bagel and is just barely conscious. My back is on the outboard side of the ship, and the morning sun is blazing in on one of the portholes, putting a big, bright circle of light right on his barely conscious face. He's squinting and chewing and basically just remembering how to be alive for today. It's painful to watch. But then zombie OPS stops chewing, slowly picks up the phone and dials the bridge. In his well-known, "I'm still totally asleep" voice, he says, "Hey, it's OPS. Could you shift our bar pat? Yeah, 165. Thanks." And puts the phone down, and then he just sits there, squinting, waiting. And then, ever so slowly, I realize that big blazing spot of sun has begun to slide off the zombie's face onto the wall behind him. After a moment, it clears his face and he blinks slowly a few times, and the brilliant beauty of what I've witnessed begins to overwhelm me. By ordering the bridge to adjust the ship's back and forth patrol by about 15 degrees, he's changed our course just enough to reposition the sun off his face. He's literally just redirected thousands of tons of steel and hundreds of people so that he could get the sun out of his eyes while he eats his bagel. I am in awe. He slowly picks up his bagel, and for a moment I'm terrified at the thought that his own genius may escape him, that he may never appreciate the epic brilliance of his laziness, since he's not going to wake up for another hour. But between his next bites, he pauses, looks at me, and gives me the faintest sly grin before returning to gnaw slowly on his zombie bagel. In high school, I had an absolute butthole of a teacher. He gave me a binder that had the name, address, phone of every student in the entire district, including the names of all their siblings. I was to type this in even though it was already printed out. I asked if it was already printed, why was I typing it? He said they paid an outside firm a bunch of money to do it, but the state pulled the funding and the firm refused to provide the files. And now the district didn't have the money to do it again, but they still needed the data. I was super teed off about how tedious of a job I was given, and complained to no end. He knew that I was the winner of a typing contest and agreed that this one project would be my entire grade for the semester. If I could manage to get it all entered into the computer by the end of the year, I'd get a passing grade. If not, I'd fail. After about 2 hours of data entry, I decided it was a bullcrap job and downloaded OCR software, scanned the whole thing in, and spent a day or two correcting scanning mistakes. My plan was to spend the rest of the semester goofing off and pretending to work. That lasted about a week before the teacher caught on. He then proceeded to start giving me more stupid, tedious work and said the previous deal was now off. I found out that part of the reason the deal with the consulting firm ended badly was his fault, and told him I was going to the school board with this information. We decided on a new plan. My grade for the semester would pass as an A, but I had free time to take on other classes the teacher offered. I used this free time to complete 1.5 other courses. In conclusion, my laziness got me 2.5 course credits in the span of time that I would have only gotten 1. Students, what's your, well, that happened moment in the classroom? At my school, we sometimes have dogs come and check the lockers for illicit substances. They always announce it like, "Teachers, please do not let students leave the classroom for the next bit of time." Everyone knows what it means, and one kid in my class grabbed his bag and jumped over 3 desks and ran out of the classroom. Turns out he was an entrepreneur of sorts. A physics class in community college. Professor was explaining conservation of angular momentum and had a kid sit on a tall chair that spins. He then had the kid hold 2 books out with extended arms and then spin as fast as he can before telling the kid to pull the books in close to his chest. Think of a figure skater and how they spin really fast. The kid immediately turns into a blur and the stool/chair starts to tip slightly until it rockets from under him like it was shot from a slingshot. The kid slams into the floor as if he got choke-slammed, and his head hit the floor in a way that sounded like someone dropped an overly ripe melon. The look on the professor's face said, "Well, that was a good run. Guess I have to find a new career now." Kid turned out okay, and everyone got a laugh, but it genuinely looked like I just witnessed a death. This wasn't my class, but it was the talk of the school for a while. A well-liked teacher gave her class a free workday and offered to play some music. Upon opening her iTunes, she found a file named Transformers MP4. Curious, she opened it. It turned out to be a hardcore adult flick that blasted through the entire class at full volume. Panicking, she couldn't figure out how to shut it off, so she ran the laptop, open and still blasting at full volume, down the hallway to the office to reduce exposure to students. It turns out the superintendent's son used one of the shared servers to browse and download the video, so it was accessible by every computer connected to the school network. The superintendent resigned a couple of years later. In high school physics, we were waiting for the teacher to show up, and another physics teacher from another class comes in with a bowling ball and says, "Do you guys think I can dribble this?" Everyone just looks at him incredulously, and he begins to repeatedly and heavily strong-arm the bowling ball onto the floor hard enough for it to rebound high enough that he can keep the momentum going. People start to laugh, but after about 5 or 6 bounces, the ball splits in half as it hits the floor. He quickly scoops up the halves, holds a conspiratorial finger to his lips, and shuffles out the door. About 15 seconds later, our physics teacher comes in, looks at the few dusty chips of bowling ball on the floor, and asks, "What was all that noise? What's this mess on the floor?" A kid fell out of the restroom ceiling and broke the whole ceiling. And in a different classroom, someone got thrown across the room into a wall. Guy with anger issues started yelling at the teacher and then slapped her across the face. Keep in mind, this fat kid was huge, and the teacher was this old, tiny Asian woman. The nicest guy in the class smokes the guy with a sucker right hand and just puts the guy out cold. When my teacher brought his samurai sword and started yelling random samurai cries while trying to teach us about ancient Japan. Quite the period we had that day. When I fell asleep in the first row, and the professor and the other students started clapping to wake me up, and when I woke up, I also started clapping like a moron. 2 things you need to know. First, there was this guy at my school whom I've now known for 25 years. His thing is to scream, "Frick yeah!" at everything. He's done it since I've known him. In case it wasn't obvious, frick is a YouTube-friendly term for what he actually said. Anytime someone mentions Matt, someone always adds a "Frick yeah!" He is huge and very loud. When he comes in the bar, he announces his presence with an exuberant "Frick yeah!" If he calls you, you say hello and he yells "Frick yeah!" You get the picture. Second, my senior year. It was a thing to sneak vodka into the school in Cinnabon mugs. For some inexplicable reason, plastic Cinnabon mugs were like a huge thing. Sashaying around flaunting your Cinnabon mug. Rolls eyes. Anyway, I'm in post-lunch class one day and one of the Cinnabon vodka girls ups and starts puking bright hot pink, fruity vomit out the window behind her. Then she stood up and screamed, "Woo! Frick yeah!" at the top of her lungs with her face covered in puke. Frick yeah dude is also in this class, so he immediately screams, "Frick yeah!" back. Then she yells, "Frick yeah!" and they go back and forth yelling, "Frick yeah! Frick yeah!" getting progressively louder with each one until the teacher gets her and ushers her out of the room. The rest of us just sat there like, WTF was that all about? This happened like 2 to 3 semesters ago at my college. I was in finance class about 10 minutes from it ending. It was around 2:30, and I had to work at 4:30. Planned on hitting the gym between. Typical day, was getting ready to go by drinking my pre-workout in the last 10 minutes of class. Well, it turns out someone had a different plan. We get an email that the school is in a legitimate lockdown. There is a questionable man on campus with a tactical vest and large backpack walking around campus. Oh boy. So here's the reactions to this information. 50% of the class immediately panics. No idea what to do, huddles in the corner texting their loved ones, one chick bawling her eyes out, making all the noise, puked in the corner. Sick. Foreign exchange student whips out his laptop and starts a League of Legends game, getting visibly agitated at the back of the room. Frickin' Yasuo, am I right? Teacher breaks a piece of metal off the vent and stands by the door prepared to what looks like kill Julius Caesar. Professor in the adjacent room, connecting door, walks in and explains that we should all calm down because worst case scenario is we die and we get a cool plaque with our name on it in the hallway. This does not help the students already having anxiety, may I note. I'm over here, phone dying, absolutely yeeted to crap on pre-workout, with the inability to expend this energy. Wondering if I'll get fired for a no-call, no-show and feeling 99% peed off rather than scared. Look to the left out the window, SWAT team on the roof.jpg. Had this sketchy man come into our room. I'm of the utmost confidence that he would have walked away without harming a single human, simply because it was apparent that God left this classroom a long time ago, and we were in more hysteria alive than dead. Anyways, 2.5 hours later, I'm able to call my boss after we were allowed to leave and tell him that the kid who got reported as simply a student going to class and had a big backpack. There was no vest. The kid who reported him had already gotten into trouble for trying to start a racial conflict a week prior and had just had an agenda to push. The amount of pissed I was immeasurable. In a full auditorium, a random guy from a higher year entered. He yelled, "Ladies, this one's for you," and then proceeded to take off his shirt and trousers, his boxers still on, luckily. He then flexed his biceps and did different poses in front of hundreds of students sitting there, not knowing how to react. He then left saying, "Sorry to bother you," to the lecturer. Oh well. Apparently he bet with his friends to do this for 3 troughs of strong beer. Alright, I'm going to tell the listeners what I told the university board. I was peer pressured and I was the victim. Go into the bathroom and open the door. The professor is there, pooping. We make eye contact and I freeze. He slowly reaches for handle to close the door, so naturally I shake his hand because I'm the world's biggest dum-dum. Not a student anymore, but we had a supply English teacher that had the good old habit of liking a little drink in the classroom. He used to pull a small bottle of vodka out of the drawer and take a small sip every few minutes while trying to be sly about it. Well, after a while, one of the students told a teacher about it, and then the supply teacher was found on his lunch break watching Netflix and drinking a glass of wine in the classroom. Funny thing is, he stayed on as a teacher for another 3 months before being totally kicked out for a similar thing. 9th grade, for reference. Everyone was being super loud, so we were pretty much unable to discern anything short of our own table. Just as the teacher is coming in and everyone is quieting down, this one kid just loudly talking and telling this one girl, who looks really effing uncomfortable, "It's 4 inches," with the most proud voice ever. "Some of the guys in my school were bullcrapping loudly before class, and one of them said pretty loudly, 'Yeah, mine's huge, effing gigantic, like 6 inches of man meat.' The guy he was talking to just kind of gave him a funny look and one said, 'Dude, 6 inches is like average.' Saw a kid die on the inside that day. You know it's bad when you exaggerate and your exaggeration isn't really impressive." I took business English my senior year of high school. We had to do a presentation on a made-up business. 2 kids did a presentation on a frozen yogurt place that was like make-your-own-yogurt thing. You would squeeze the flavors and stuff out of fake cow udders. Straight from the teat was the name of the business. It was a long day. Gentlemen, I'm interested in franchising. Freshman year of college, I had one professor who would randomly call on students in class, and if they didn't answer correctly, he would proceed to give them a roast in front of the whole class for their lack of knowledge on the subject material. I was in the class with a few of my good friends, as it was a prerequisite that we all needed to have. Even though we got our fair share of roasting from him as well, we all thought it was funny, and knew it was his way of making sure the students are engaged in the lecture. About halfway through the semester, he called on one person, and after she incorrectly answered, he started to casually roast this student. At this point, another girl raised her hand to get the professor's attention. After he called on her, she proceeded to vocally berate him about how he was treating us all like children, as well as call him every vulgar word she could think of. At this point, he's shouting back at her too, complete with all the same vulgarities that she used on him, and me and my friends are just sitting in the back, laughing under our breath while simultaneously being completely dumbfounded that this kind of stuff actually happens in college. Finally, he yells at her to leave lecture. She obliges, and as soon as she is out of the room, he proceeds to roast her even more to the class. It was so odd to see something like this, especially since I had just come from high school a few months before. Man, college is wild. Ex-student here. This was a long time ago. We sent whispers around the classroom to all drop our books on the ground, pretending it was by accident when the clock on the wall hit an exact time. When it happened, our teacher was in the middle of writing on the chalkboard, and she turned around, shocked, to find us all picking up our books. She cried after that, and we all started to feel really bad. Learned later that she had just had a miscarriage and was just trying to get through her day and not think about it. We broke through that face she was putting on by accident. Sorry, Teach. We didn't know you, and we all liked you. I'm sorry for the emotional whiplash there, folks, but since I found this story, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it while writing this particular episode. So there it is. I went to a small college and our classroom sizes were very small, 15 to 25 people, so we got to know everyone pretty well. There was this one guy who came in so high that he fell off his chair. Thankfully, the professor was relatively chill, so she let him go home. Not my story, but my friend told me how on the first day of class, during introductions and icebreakers, this girl got up and ran toward the door. She didn't make it and threw up all over the place, looked around her, and completely horrified, left the class. She came back for her stuff later. I have the same reaction to icebreakers. Tell us one fun fact about yourself. Also, another time, my professor knew I was turning 21 the night before, and when I came in the next morning, completely hungover and dead, he and the whole class applauded me. It was nice. Back in 8th grade middle school, we had this really cool and chill US history teacher. He never raised his voice and was pretty laid back about class and work. He taught in a storytelling kind of manner, and I don't even remember annotating any document in his class. Well, we had that one kid. In this story, I'm going to call him Jim. Jim was always late to class and never turned stuff in. He was that one really cringy kid that everyone either hated or pitied. My teacher never really got fed up with him and would always show his distaste for him in his facial expressions. My teacher normally would pull him aside to talk to him about his tardiness or missing assignments. Jim would say he would be earlier/do the assignments, but he never did. One day, Jim walks in late again. My teacher is about to start teaching, and then he turns and sees Jim walking in. Well, this time, my teacher wasn't so happy about it. It was the middle of the school year toward the end, and my teacher must have gotten so fed up with Jim at that point. My teacher yells Jim's name at the top of his lungs. He normally had a boomy voice, but when he yelled, it amplified 100 times over. The ground literally shook when he yelled, and I'm sure they could hear him downstairs at the other end of the school. Our school wasn't that small either. For the rest of the class period, about 30 minutes, literally it was dead silent. Everyone was still kind of shocked from it. Someone asked, "Meth, can I cook it?" in chemistry. Another person asked our math teacher who was going home to Canada over break if she could threaten to kill his mum who lives there. Same person told the same teacher that he couldn't do the work because he has 100 extra chromosomes. He doesn't. She responded by saying, "That explains why you look like that." As somebody who seems to just have a really strong idiot magnet located within their person, I sympathize heavily with these teachers and their rotating clown show of students. I remember being maybe in 2nd grade and this one kid in our class kept yelling trash through the window at some 10th to 11th grader that was standing outside our windows. Our window was easy to climb in and out as it wasn't placed at a high level from the ground. Dude that was standing outside got annoyed with him, I guess, and just jumped on the windowsill, which was pretty wide, and said something along the lines of, "You kids should not be saying things like this. I'm older and won't do anything, but someone in this life will at some point if you keep this behavior." Then went back to his friends or whatever like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Our whole class of 2nd graders was shocked. I know it would have been more interesting if I remembered the details, but it happened a long time ago. Okay, so this happened a while ago, so I might not have all the details. So I was on the school bus and we weren't allowed to eat on the bus. So the kids behind me were talking about lunch tomorrow and one of them said, "Yeah, I can bring bacon." I was hungry, so I said, "Bacon? Who's bringing bacon?" The bus driver overheard me, but didn't know it was me, stopped the bus and yelled, "Bacon? Who has bacon?" Then he walked down the aisle and looked to see who had the bacon. It was so funny, but you kind of had to be there. First day of school, freshman year in woodshop. Teacher just finishes showing us a safety video on proper use of how to use a table saw. Then he was about to give a demonstration and said, "Now, you're going to see me do things a little differently than how you just saw it being done in the video you just watched. But that's just because I'm a professional, and I have been doing this for over 30 years. Teacher then proceeded to immediately cut off 3 of his fingers with the saw at the front of the classroom. Blood was spraying everywhere. He was screaming, holding his hand. Guys I was with in the back of the class started laughing, thinking it was a prank. Girl in the front of the class projectile vomited. A few of us helped him and his fingers on the floor, and went and got the nurse. Someone called an ambulance. They were able to reattach them at the hospital. Wood class was cancelled for the rest of the year, and we all took some home economics in its place. This was an amazing Reads username, totally made up story? Damn it! When I was in college, I was sitting in a geology lecture center when someone dressed in a banana costume crashes in, does a lap around the room, then gets chased out of the room by a guy in a gorilla suit who came in after him. Was in a math class when a random student fell into the classroom and simply yelled, "You pushed me too hard, shifthead." He got up and left as if nothing really happened. The class laughed their butts off, including my math teacher. That's something I only see in cartoons. In high school, this big-sized metalhead was always late for the first class period of the day because he was hanging out in the hallway with his girlfriend for too long and never gave himself enough time to walk to the classroom. My teacher was a real laid-back kind of guy and had a flowing sort of teaching style. He really didn't mind, but one day he got annoyed because he knew the reason. He told the dude that he could say goodbye to his girlfriend a few minutes earlier and get to class on time. There was a little back and forth as this metalhead attempted to bluff and lie his way into some type of excuse. The teacher wasn't having it and said that he had to come to class on time once. He said, "You have to do it once. If you don't get to this class on time tomorrow, you're going to have to stay after school for detention." There was back and forth as this metalhead attempted to determine the seriousness of this threat. It seemed pretty serious. The teacher said he'd make the kid help clean the classroom. The next morning, we're all in there, the bell rings, and the teacher opens his mouth to speak. Suddenly from the hallway is the thunderous sound of someone wearing heavy boots running down it toward the room. Accompanying this is a deep-throated scream. No! The teacher looks at the class in shock as the door flies open and there is one last thunderous clap from a boot being stomped as the metalhead enters the room. Out of breath, this kid casually walks to his seat and says in his deep raspy voice, "I don't know what they're screaming about out there." I doubt that anyone else in the school could have yelled like that. There was a guy who sat in the front row of one of my classes when I was in community college. He would just bring fresh vegetables and just eat like a squash and cauliflower raw during class. Oh, persistent loud lecture eaters, how I haven't missed you, or the universal strong body odors your community of public munchers seems to share. 2 girls in a fight. One of them German suplexed the other into a table. I know that sounds like wrestling, but my teacher in 8th grade had an old wooden table next to her desk to hold extra books and stuff. Girls fought over a dude, I think, and after the slapping and hair pulling, it happened. This is in a college lecture hall, but with not too many students. During class, we heard female moans. At first, we each thought that they were hearing things, so nobody responded. 5 minutes later, the moans got even louder, and we turned around to the source. We thought it was probably someone watching an adult movie who accidentally forgot to plug their headphones in. The dude was 1 hand deep into the girl sitting next to him. Her short skirt was hiked up. I was sitting in my physics class trying to stay awake because that class is one of the first classes of the day, and I didn't get much sleep the night before. I sit at a table in the back of the class by myself. The table to my left has 2 of my friends and 1 other student sitting at it. I forget exactly what was being taught that day, but I remember my friends suddenly saying things like, "Oh my God, are you all right? And maybe you should go to the nurse." I looked over to see my friends grabbing tissues and giving them to the other student whose nose was bleeding, which wouldn't be such a problem if there wasn't so much blood pouring out from this guy's nose. It was concerning, to say the least. Our teacher told him to go and see the nurse. He nodded, stood up, and then heeled out the room. It was probably the weirdest thing I have seen in a while. What's the smallest amount of power you've seen someone abuse? Worked for a small computer repair company, 4 people total. The boss, 2 grease monkeys, we did all the small stuff like reformats and virus removal, and the secretary. It was awesome. I loved that job. The boss and my coworker were super chill and helpful. But the secretary, we'll call her Lorelei, was a different story. When I started working, I got a text from an old friend of mine warning me about her. Apparently, I had been hired because he had just been fired because of her. Okay, I thought, but she was great, very helpful and nice. She'd bring us Starbucks once in a while and other little niceties. Maybe my old friend had been the problem. Anyway, life was great. The months passed and things started to change. The nice secretary came out one day and told us she was no longer a secretary, but the office manager, and berated us any time we didn't call her the office manager. It was strange, but whatever. A little while later, I got called into the boss's office where she is standing right next to him, like Iago perched on Jafar's shoulder. She tells me my work priorities have been shifted. I was no longer allowed to work on any computer that came into the shop or go out on service calls. Instead, she said, I was to monitor and report on our customers' server activity. Okay, I guess this must be important? For the next week, I'm confined to my desk and printed out small batches of computer jargon that made very little sense and took less than an hour to do. When I asked what else I should do, she would intervene before my boss responded and tell me to try and improve the reports, whatever that meant. The next Monday, she calls me into the office again and says I'm on work probation. I have 3 weeks to be more productive or I'll be fired. Apparently, I wasn't doing enough to earn a paycheck. I did my best to make the reports as readable as possible, and when no one was looking, I'd finish up clients' computers that were on the workbench. Simple stuff like clicking next after a virus scan, until she caught me and reprimanded me for half an hour about how I don't have permission to do anything outside my job description. I gave up, sad to admit. I could see the writing on the wall. I spent the last week goofing off on my computer until the next Monday. I get called into the office. There's the boss I once respected, sitting like a beaten dog, and Lorelei, sitting like a queen in her place. She tells me I haven't improved my performance, and they're sorry, but here's my last check. Goodbye. I turn to my boss and look him square in the eye and ask him if he really agreed with it. He slumps his shoulders and said, kinda. I went home and texted that old friend asking him what happened when he got fired. He told me pretty much the same story I just went through. Later on, I hear they hired some other kid to take my place. Same thing ends up happening to him. Jeez. Sorry for the novel, I don't talk about this very much. I guess it feels good to let it out. As a closer, she eventually got fired after trying to get rid of the best tech guy they had. My coworker/superior. I think my old boss finally grew a spine. She ended up leaving her husband and 2 daughters for another woman who eventually left her. No idea where she is now. Don't care. Maybe it's just me, but when someone in a non-military setting insists that I call them by their job title, it immediately makes it 10 times harder to take them seriously. I had a coworker who cheated when she played games with 3-year-olds. When the kids called her out on it, she would deny it and say that she was a teacher and whatever she did was allowed in the game. Her entire self-esteem seemed to be dependent on winning games designed for preschoolers. When people used to quit at my old company, I'd let them click the mouse button to deactivate their AD account on the last day. Everyone loved it because it was a single act that meant closure. A teacher in high school tried to send me to the office for having an electronic device out in the hallway. The device was medical equipment, and after I explained that to him, he told me he didn't care because I'd still broken a school rule. Needless to say, I didn't get in trouble. For a bit of context, this all took place before school even started, and there were plenty of kids waiting in the halls for class to start. I'm diabetic, so I was using my insulin pump when this teacher walked past. I didn't end up going to the office because my awesome broadcasting teacher heard the other teacher shouting in the hallway and came out to see what was going on. I did a lot of work for my broadcasting teacher before and after school, so he knew me pretty well. He didn't even wait to find out what was going on before he told the guy to stop shouting and to leave me alone. And since the butthole teacher only picked on students, he left without another word, no repercussions. I worked at a small retail store with a manager, an assistant manager, and me, the employee. The manager loved me. The assistant manager loved me some days and hated me others. One day, when the assistant manager was in a particularly hateful mood, she threatened to recommend the manager that I be fired. I said, "Why? The manager loves me and I'm a good, reliable worker. She would never fire me." And she said, "Yeah, I know she wouldn't, but as assistant manager, I have the power to recommend you get fired." My high school did an end-of-year celebration on campus during school time. It was just the graduating year and the year below us, so it wasn't that disruptive. But to prevent it getting out of control, the school hired 4 security guards. One of them decided to lock all gates at the end of the day. We couldn't leave unless we exited through the office. I'd say there were around 700 students, and he just refused to let us leave, until another security guard had to fight through the crowd to let him know he was just being a jerk. He unlocked the gate I was at, and then unlocked the others. When I did safety patrol in elementary school, we gave out "good job" tickets to younger kids if they made good choices in the hallway. My best friend from my neighborhood was a grade below me, so every day I would give him a good job card so his mum would let him come outside and play. He's the only person I ever gave good job cards to. My kids were quite little, and I was giving them turns each day of being in charge of cleaning the living room to exercise leadership skills. When it was my son's turn, I had left them alone for a while and came back to the girls complaining that he was ordering them to punch each other. In elementary school, I had this one teacher who, when she would have to leave the classroom, she'd pick a random kid to stand at the chalkboard and watch the class. No one was allowed to talk or get up until the teacher came back. To be honest, my class was pretty rowdy, and given the chance, we could get really loud, which is why the teacher didn't want us talking if she was gone. If you talked or got up, your name went on the board and you'd lose 5 minutes of recess. Then, tally marks would be added if you talked or got up again, and you'd lose an additional 5 minutes. And if you got enough, you'd start losing time on the next day's recess. One day, she picked this one kid. We'll call him Cole. Cole gets up there and he's slowly looking back and forth between each of us, and if he thought someone was going to talk, he'd put their name on the board. They didn't have to do anything, and he'd put their name on the board and cost them 5 minutes of recess. He then offered those with their names on the board that he'd take their names off before the teacher got back if they held their breath until he said they could breathe. Oh boy, in my freshman year of college, we had a group project, and of course we have someone who decides to elect themselves as a leader. Okay, cool, no issues. You don't know how to code, but we can teach you. But he didn't want to. He wanted to delegate and then sit on his butt. So the 3 of us coded this flight management program while he organized meetings and set deadlines for us. He raged when we didn't finish said tasks within the time limit and went off on ridiculous rants. The kicker was that we had to include our names as comments on which part of the code we did and got graded on that. We continuously bugged him to learn just a bit to at least create the front interface or the help section, but he straight up refused. Since he didn't write a single piece of code, he ended up getting a 0 in the project. He started blaming us for not putting his name on the code and went and complained to the professor. The professor laughed in his face after he heard our story. This was a CS class. I feel like everyone has met this person in university at some point, no matter their field of study. I think most of them end up in middle management later in life. When I was first starting my job, there was this prick who worked in the office who told me he was a supervisor. He would order me around and give me extra work on top of the work I'm trying to do, and give me crap later for not having it all done. He'd make me do unsafe stuff and work in areas I hadn't been officially trained in. Someone let it slip that he's just an office clerk and not a supervisor, so the next time he walked up to give me extra work, I told him to get a real supervisor to okay it, and he paused, looked at me, took the paperwork back, and went back to the office. Didn't see him for the rest of that day. In my AP government class in high school, we had a 2-week mock congress, and they each had to propose a bill to our mock subcommittee. I was named chairman of the subcommittee. One of the leaders of the Republicans, Danny, shared the same first period with me. Our first period was really strict about being late, but if someone in the class said that you showed up and went to the bathroom, she would not mark you late. So the first thing I did was make an alliance with Danny. He covered for my lateness and I pushed his bill through the subcommittee. And we learned about real politics. Political corruption really is the gift that keeps on giving. I used to volunteer at the local library when I was in high school. Every year they had a book sale to help raise money for events. 25 cents for paperbacks and 50 cents for hardbacks. I was also working retail at this time, so I decided being cashier would be pretty appropriate. It was going pretty well. I kept the line moving and was used to the small talk of being at a register. The head librarian was busy organizing and she had one of the mum volunteers keep an eye on things. Not long after she started supervising, she came over to me and told me she didn't think it was a good idea for me to be on register. I was pretty confused by this. No one had complained, there was hardly ever a wait, there was no reason for her to think I wasn't capable. I told her it was fine, that I was used to this with my part-time job. She was still visibly uneasy and insisted I help with something else. It got to the point where she was practically demanding me to go somewhere else. Not wanting to cause a scene, I went to assist elsewhere. I found out later she thought the math of calculating the totals was too hard for children to be responsible for. Seriously, I was in AP Calc and she didn't think that I could add 25 cents and 50 cents increments. The best part of it all was that my mum went to the book sale a few years after and the same lady was on the register. She had a cheat sheet for adding up the book totals. I'm still bitter. For those wondering about the cheat sheet, it was a list of the 25-cent increments like this. 1 book, 25 cents. 2 books, 50 cents. 3 books, 75 cents, etc., etc. I had a babysitter lay out a bunch of rules, including words we couldn't say. Not bad words, mind you, but shoe was one of them, and I specifically remember being sent to my room without dinner for saying it. My brother ended up busting me out, and we locked her out of the house. Viva la révolution! I'm a receptionist at a very quiet office. To get in, visitors have to push a button that makes a loud sound inside the office. Then I see them on camera and unlock the door remotely. This girl comes every day, early in the morning, to check if there's anything to pick up. She works upstairs. She just pops her head in to see the empty box and leaves. But before this, she holds down the effing button, and the sound is horribly loud, jarring, and elongated unnecessarily. So I just sit here and stare at her on the camera for way longer than I need before buzzing her in. I'm a petty B-word. I don't think you're that much of a B-word. I think I would try playing a game with this person. I would not open the door for longer and longer increments and wait until she was just about to push the buzzer again and then open the door. Hold her up for the maximum amount of time possible every day. Maybe I'm a petty B-word too. A friend of my mum babysat us once. Major control freak. I tried to play with a small box of Legos in the living room, and she told me to clean it up because someone might step on them. So I pack up and go into my room and start playing. She yells at me from the living room that she can't see me, so I can't even be in my own freaking room. She's been sitting on her big butt the whole day, eating our Oreos and potato chips, so I say screw it and dump the box in the middle of the hallway and start building. She flips her lid and screams at me to pick them up. I tell her no. She calls my mum and yells that I'm being very rebellious and she needs to get home and rein in her horrible little son. I hate Sue. In elementary school, everyone had the chance to be a line leader on his or her birthday. One kid was kind of socially awkward, so on her day she decided to give someone else the title. Our teacher was pissed off because she felt disrespected by this mild change in line leadership. If you don't want to accept the title I generously gave to you, go to Mrs. P's classroom. I'm trying to be kind to you, but you're being a brat who thinks she has the right to decide who's in charge. Then she went off on the other girl for indecent behavior and harassment, even though she just kind of yelled at the awkward chick, but whatever. Maybe the birthday girl shouldn't have called someone else the line leader, but the teacher took personal offense for something so trivial. Worked at the concession stands at the beach one summer. Whenever responsibilities were given out of who was supposed to do what for that day, one of my co-workers would suck up to the supervisors, so they would give him the clipboard for him to decide who did what. Naturally, he never assigned himself anything. After handing out the jobs, he'd go and sit in the little office inside the stand and do nothing, while the rest of us worked. One time he assigned me the job of cleaning the boardwalk. I was to take a broom and dustpan and walk the entire length of the boardwalk looking for litter to sweep up. The idiot didn't know that the cleaning of the boardwalk wasn't the responsibility of us concession stand workers. That job belonged to the workers employed by the state. We concession stand workers were responsible for the cleanliness of only the small cement patio area directly in front of our stand, not the boardwalk too. I took advantage of his stupidity and I walked down the boardwalk long enough to be out of sight of my concession stand and sat down on a bench for a couple of hours or so, resting and relaxing while he was doing the same in the office. When working fast food, I was told to scrub the bathroom floors. It was already really clean, so it didn't take long. I went back up front, and before I could say anything, my supervisor sent me back to do a better job. Went back, locked the doors, and played on my phone for over half an hour. Later, I was told that the bathroom looked really great. Easiest hour of my time while working there. I was at a completely empty airport and only needed to identify myself before I could pick up my luggage. There was no queue, so I skipped the line. That butthole at the desk made me walk back and compelled me to zigzag all around the fences where nobody was standing. And afterwards, he and a colleague laughed at me because he knew he could use his power like that. At first, we obviously didn't go back because it was bullcrap. However, he refused to help us then, so we rolled our eyes and did it anyway, just to get it over with instead of making a fuss. It was a small foreign airport and authorities would not give a crap about complaining tourists. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the closest that small, petty airport attendant ever came to feeling joy. Anybody who is involved in running a homeowners association. Back when I lived with my parents, there was a woman on the HOA that lived across the street from us. Both houses were on the corner. She decided that there was too much traffic on the street in front of her house in the morning, so she decided to put up an official-looking sign stating that no one could turn right at the stop sign in front of her house from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Mind you, people were turning right at that corner because there was an elementary school located on the street behind her house, and many people needed to drive there. But she didn't care, it was disrupting her, and she wasn't going to allow it. However, I also needed to turn there to get out of the neighborhood for work, so one night, a few days after she put up the sign, I stole it. She put it up again. I stole it again. She responded by selling her house. Justice was served. I have a good friend who is on the board of his association. He is also a trained mediator and a really good guy. The board is only 3 people, basically because no one else wants to put up with anyone else complaining. This position wears on him so bad. I don't think he has actually ever delivered a written delivery, which would be a violation or order, but simply talks to people. Oh, your yard isn't mowed because your wife has been in the hospital. No problem, get it done when you can, type of guy. His stress comes from the neighbors complaining and tattling on the people next door over the smallest stuff. I honestly feel bad for him many days. My dad actually got elected to the head of an HOA because he wanted to chill it out a bit. He would get really long letters from the previous HOA head, and they were just massive rants about how he needed to buckle down on these people that had next to nothing wrong with their yards, fences, or whatever tiny BS this guy deemed unacceptable. My dad just told him TS and to stop complaining about every little thing. It was me. I was working at the tax office. Someone called up. Their return was late, so they had a $100 fine. He also owed some tax. Not a lot, but enough. So he calls up and he's telling me about how he hadn't been working this year and things were tight, and I'm sat there filling in a form to put him on a payment plan. And then I realized this was a kid from school that had bullied me. So I told him it was TS and he had 30 days to pay before he added another fine. Then I closed the form and ended the call. Wanted to relocate with my cool little rabbit. Brought a ticket and confirmed with the airline beforehand. Ticket had a comment that said, authorized to travel with a rabbit in the cargo hold. Paid extra. On the day of my flight, after security checks, some lady who's the chief service officer, which basically was a 50-year-old flight attendant, said we're not flying. The rabbit will escape and chew electrical wiring and kill us all, apparently. Also, she had no superior and reported to no one. It took a lot of tears from my SO, lots of shouting from me, and 1 hour to get her to get special approval from the captain. I don't think I could ever take the little guy back now, stuck in Germany for a few more years. That lady made the day of starting a new life extremely traumatic. Frick you, Hannah, wherever you are. Security guard at a community college. This guy was the definition of a rent-a-cop. Big, fat, awkward, no gun, and a whistle that he was not the least bit shy about using. A girl I was hanging out with needed to go up there to turn in a form, and I went with her. We got there, and the parking lot was deserted. That's when we realized it was a holiday weekend, but since we had already driven up there, we went to see if the offices were open. Sure enough, the door to the administration building is unlocked, so we go in. After walking around for a bit, we realize that all the offices are closed, so we decide to cut our losses and head out. Suddenly, from the other end of the hall, we hear, "Freeze! Stop what you're doing right now!" It's the tub of crap security guard who comes down and starts screaming at us like a drill sergeant, demanding answers for why we're in the building, accusing us of breaking in and not letting us get a word in. Finally, I just cut him off and said, "Dude, we're enrolled students and the flipping door was unlocked. If you honestly think we're here to rob the place, call the real cops, but we're already on our way out." He then yelled a couple of things about this being our only warning, etc., as we walked away from him and left. What names of people you've met made you wonder what their parents were thinking? Boss's friend named their kid Monster Galileo, followed by their last name. The nurse tried to talk them out of it. They called in child services to talk them out of it. The people insisted. Kid goes by Galileo. Honestly, I kind of like the sound of it for an adult or a performer's name, but being a kid named Monster has to be rough in school. I feel like you'd be cool as heck in elementary school if you were named Monster. Middle school would be rough, but hopefully by that time you're coasting on the popularity from elementary and just carry the awesomeness forward. It really depends on your personality. If you end up being a shy kid or do anything embarrassing, that name would be brutal to have. If you're popular or edgy, then it's an awesome name. My boyfriend's grandmother wanted to name her daughter Sunshine. The midwife said that wasn't allowed because it wasn't a real name, and his grandmother had no other baby backup names. So a few minutes later, when she heard someone down the hall screaming, "Tina," she named her daughter Tina because she couldn't think of anything else on the spot. I once met a dude named Lovey. It was a family name. I think it was especially cute because he was such a big tough guy. There's a male New Zealand weightlifter named Precious. My boyfriend was nearly called Egbert, but predominantly Egg for short. I'm glad they decided against it. I knew a guy named Engbert. I don't know why his parents would call him that because Eng means scary in our language. He was kind of a bully though, so I guess it fits. I worked at a registrar for a while, and among the birth certificates I got, some of the standouts I saw were Killer, Syphilis, and Sweet Prayer Sunrise. This last one was a boy. Any idea why someone would want to name their kid Syphilis? The father gave her both at the same time? The parents probably heard it somewhere, didn't know what it meant, but liked the ring of it. My dad knew a girl in school named Bimbo. Bimbo brand bread is one of, if not the largest manufacturer of bread products on the planet. Except it never really took off in America because we don't pronounce Bimbo like the Mexican manufacturer does. They pronounce it Bimbo, not Bimbo. As much as that might explain where the word came from, I can't imagine that being named after a brand of bread would have been much more preferable to the girl. I guess at least the pronunciation might throw people off. Before I was born, my dad wanted to name me Sky, but he thought that replacing the Y with an I would be cute. Thank goodness my mum isn't stupid, or I might have been named Ski. I knew a woman who named her daughter Sunny with an I. White, new age sort of woman. I don't think she realized it, ever. Was that girl always fighting with her sister, Shia? My classmate's mother was a maternity nurse, and she has a couple who wanted to name their son Colin, but wanted to give him a unique spelling for it. I don't understand why parents do this. It doesn't make a boring name more interesting at all. All it does is set your child up for lifelong inconvenience. They spelled it out for her to put on the birth certificate. Colon. They tried to name their son Colon, as in the organ attached to your butt. When my classmate's mother explained this to them, they were painfully embarrassed and asked her to write it down with the normal spelling instead. I don't think they'll ever live it down. I went to school with a colon as well. It was not great for him. Could you pass the salt? Eventually. Conversely, I went to high school with a kid named Colin, and our physics teacher constantly pronounced it colon. Like, how many times does he have to correct you, lady? In France, there used to be a list of names that you had to choose from, mostly based on that day's name, saint, and 3 to 4 others, which is why there were so many Jean, Marc, Louise, Philippes, Marys, Annes, Valeries, etc. in France. Now it's free choice, but anyone can ask a judge to cancel a name choice and force the parents to suggest one the judge finds acceptable. So no names like Coca-Cola, Xerox, substance names, butthole, Nutella, fruit, devil, blue, murder. Plus the rejected name gets added to a banned list to streamline the rejection in the future. In Denmark, we still have an approved list of names. You can apply for a name to be added, but other than that, you choose from the very long list. Portugal also has a list of names. It's included multiple spellings of the same name. Eric, and Eric with a K are all allowed, though Eric's not really a Portuguese name. And names that aren't just from the Portuguese language. I think they are there so that children of third-generation immigrants can have names from their cultures. However, if at least one of the parents isn't Portuguese, you're allowed to name your child anything that's not offensive. My brother talked my mother out of naming me Mulan because he had a major crush on her and didn't think a sack of potatoes like me deserved to be given her name. I tried to tell someone not to name their kid Tarmac. They learned the word from NASCAR. They could have just named him Jimmy, Jeff, or Dale. Not a nurse, but as a med student, a patient wanted to name her child Mudpiles. The nurses silently protested and waited a few days. Mum changed her mind. Mudpiles, I love it. God, what kind of a kid Mudpiles might have been. The S at the end really makes it. I wish the mom hadn't changed her mind. I would support baby Mudpiles all the way. I mean, maybe the mom was also a med student, just considering that Mudpiles is a pretty common acronym that med students find helpful. My ex-husband didn't think it was fair that girls could be named Grace or Hope, etc., and seriously suggested pestilence, war, or plague for a boy. His choice for a girl was Tangerine. Fortunately, we never had any children. I'm a Grace, still waiting to meet the pestilence of my dreams. The thought of meeting someone and them being like, "This is my son Plague and my daughter Tangerine," is killing me, oh my god. Another story where I can bring up Discworld characters. Allow me to introduce Hope, Charity, Chastity, and Prudence Carter, and their brothers Animal Lover, Anger, Deviousness, Covetousness, Jealousy, and Catastrophe. You can't just leave them hanging with that small reference. The Carter parents were a quiet and respectable Lancre family who got into a bit of a mix-up when it came to naming their children. First, they had 4 daughters who were christened Hope, Chastity, Prudence, and Charity, because naming girls after virtues is an ancient and unremarkable tradition. Then their first son was born, and out of some misplaced idea about how this naming business was done, he was called Anger Carter, followed later by Jealousy Carter, Animal Lover Carter, and Covetousness Carter. Chastity was enjoying life as a lady of negotiable affection in Ankh-Morpork, Prudence had 13 children, and Charity expected to get $1's change out of 75 pence, whereas the boys had grown into amiable, well-tempered men, and Bestiality Carter was, for example, very kind to animals. My uncle wanted to name his daughter Raider God. I'm glad they settled on Jada. I work in a music store that offers lessons and rents instruments. We have a list of the oddest child names. Jamuary, Quest with a W, Sixte, Shebra, Battle, and Shy Ann are just a few on there. The best one was IDOWorkHereLady. When speaking with the grandmother, she said that the mum wanted to name her Olivia, but the father hated the name. The dad saw a bottle of Aleve on the counter, so he and the mother compromised and came up with IDOWorkHereLady. Haha, Shebra, followed by her brother, Hebra. Hijockstrap? As much as I want to meet someone called Hijockstrap, I imagine that Shebra may have a different culture behind its origin than the others. My dad loves Stevie Nicks and wanted to name all of us Rhiannon, but my mum wouldn't let him. So my oldest sister's name ended up being Stevie Nicole, but now some people always assume she's a guy when they see the name Stevie. Rhiannon is a popular name in Wales. It wouldn't seem unusual here. My sister's name is Rhiannon, but my mom was always scared people would call her Rhea for short, so she only called my sister by her middle name. Kind of funny to type that out. She loved Fleetwood Mac but was too worried to fully commit to the name Rhiannon. I once had a student named Linoleum. Some midwife really dropped the ball on that one. My brother wanted to name our soon-to-be younger brother Corn Peas, and our parents almost went with it, because they felt bad about asking for his input and then rejecting it. Fortunately, they got over that and passed on the name. Cornelius Pearson Smith. Corn Peas for short. Cornelius grew up with a perpetually broken nose thanks to his name. And here my mum was talked out of naming me Violet. Sounds like an old lady, they said. Aw, but Violet is such a cool name. I know. Instead, I got one of the most common names of the 80s. When I went to college, I lived in a hallway where there were literally 6 of us. My roommate had the same first name as well. I do like my name because it sounds good with my last name, but I have only once met a Violet in 37 years, and she's my friend's niece. I'm a teacher. There are certain names that each teacher avoids because we've had a student, or 7 with that name, who were difficult in some way or another. One year, there were 4 Dylans in the same cohort, and they were all hell on wheels. One of the teachers at that grade level had a baby with his wife that spring, and she named the kid Dylan. The rest of us were like, "Didn't you vehemently veto that?" He just shrugged and said it was important to her, and he wasn't the superstitious type. Flash forward a few years, and I saw a toddler tearing through the salad bar at the grocery store, spilling things, moving spoons from one container to another, reaching in it with his hands. It was Dylan. I haven't ever met a Brian, Brandon, or Braden that wasn't a terrible brat. My late, unlamented brother-in-law was Brian, pain in the butt to be very mild, substance addict, tried to kidnap my child twice, got married on my husband's birthday, etc. Brandon down the street would come into our yard and steal from my kids and harass my cats. I've always found that any boy named Angel was poorly behaved. This didn't extend to girls, though. Angela, Angelina, and Angelica, they were fine. Boys named Angel are always the worst behaved. Also, Anthony, Bodie, Kevin, Travis, Vincent, and Victor. My rule in general, anything with a V in it will probably be a pain in the neck. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a coworker named Trina. When she was pregnant, she told me that she and her husband had decided to name the baby Latrine. I had to explain to her that she was naming the poor baby after the hole in the ground that soldiers crap into. She was horrified and changed it to Katrina. 2 days after the kid was born, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. I hate to wonder what would have happened to New Orleans if she did name her Latrine. That would have been quite the crap storm. I have a false leg. My parents had to be talked out of calling me Peggy by the midwife. Oh, you probably could have taken them to court if they called you that. Oh, Peggy Sue. You could sue for a pretty penny, Peggy. My mother, who has an odd, to say the least, sense of humor, wanted to name the baby brother Ichabod Rusty. Our surname is Ford. She was determined to call him Itchy Rusty Ford. Tickled herself crapless through the pregnancy. And look, it was funny, I mean I was 12, but everyone thought she was just being her usual goofy self. Apparently, she got attached to it, and at some point Dad just said, "Frick no, we're not naming the baby that." They settled on something much more appropriate. Although, these days, I think the little crap might have been better named Itchy Rusty in my opinion. Similarly, our surname is something that can basically mean male member in my language. My dad wanted to name me Elwood if I was a boy. My mum was like, "Woody Wang? No way!" And my dad legitimately saw no issue with that. His second choice was to name me after his father, Harry. Good thing I'm a girl. Not a midwife, but lived with the student midwife when I was a student. The first set of twins she delivered got called Red and Blue. When I worked in a boring admin job dealing with applications from members of the public, I came across Jessica Rabbit. Saw her passport and everything. I just hope that she chose that later in life rather than her parents landing her with it. The worst ones I saw in that job were combinations made by women getting married and taking their husband's surnames, so can't really be blamed on the parents. I took my husband's surname so my initials would no longer be JCB, which is a tractor brand in the UK. My dad knew when naming me and thought it was hilarious. I'm getting married this year, so my initials will soon be MEH. Of all things in life, I can easily say I didn't see that coming. Hang in there, meh. My wife used to have the initials HOT, which she is, but now is HOR, which she's not so thrilled about. I was originally supposed to be Lex, like Lex Luthor. My dad talked my mum into naming me Alexander and my nickname be Lex, but they just called me Alex. I always assumed Lex Luthor's full name was Alexander. Oh, it is. I have a son named Alexander who goes by Lex. It's a perfect name for him, even though he's a very kind and compassionate kid. As a family medicine resident, I personally delivered 2 different girls named Khaleesi. This was around 2016, well before Season 8. I imagine there might be some buyer's remorse on the parents' part at this point. Yep, I've often wondered about the thousands of children who were called Daenerys or Khaleesi and how they reacted after the Mother of Dragons went full crazy murderer fascist. And I'm just going to say I frickin' called it about how that was going to go down. Working as an ERT on overnights, I got called to an OB to help out a lot. One name will always stick with me because of how unfortunate it is for the kid and how ridiculous everything about it was. The mum was deep into crystal and other substance use, and she told us she wanted him named Zion. We were like, oh cool, no problem, so we asked her to fill out the paperwork of everything for us to submit, and put in the chart, and she wrote down Vazion. She looked us dead in the ears and said the V is silent. She also gave him 5 middle names because she didn't know which one was the father, so he got them all. Should have named that kid Pokemon. Kids caught all the middle names. I'm neither of these, but I had a classmate in university whose name was Mega Nathan. To date, I don't know why Nathan failed to suffice. When I first read that name, I thought it would be pronounced similar to Afghanistan, Meganathan. On second look, I'm now wondering whether it's actually pronounced Mega Nathan and struggling to decide which is worse. My dad wanted to name me Snövit, the Swedish name for Snow White, but in the end my parents named me something else. Had my younger brother been a girl, he had been named Tornrosa, meaning Thorn Rose, which is the Swedish name on Sleeping Beauty. Never did get to the bottom of what my dad's obsession with princesses was all about. My mum is a public school librarian, and the cringiest name she's encountered so far is a girl named Lesme, pronounced like Leslie but with an M. I also have an acquaintance with the last name Forrest, whose father was eventually talked out of naming her Rain. Back in 2000 to 2004, I worked in a hospital doing admin, and an old battle axe of a senior midwife stomped over with this angry-looking pregnant teenager in tow. "Varvara!" Old Battleaxe roared, "Varvara, open up that internet-y thing on your computer." Old Battleaxe didn't know computers, but she was well scary, so I agreed, and opened up the internet-y thing. "Show this ridiculous child the first thing that appears when you type in the word Chanterelle." The angry, pregnant teenager whined about how it was a pretty name and loads of girls were naming their little girl it, and then she went stone-dead silent when she saw picture after picture of nasty sulfur-yellow mushrooms sprouting out of muddy forest floors. "Told you, it's a frickin' fungus!" Old Battleaxe roared and stamped off to be terrifying and sensible to other pregnant teenagers, leaving me with the angry one. Turned out that the name she'd actually been thinking of was Chardonnay, which is both the name of a very expensive wine and the name of a character in a UK soap opera called Footballers' Wives, which is about as classy as it sounds. The baby got that as a middle name later on, which was fine. The first name was Sophie or something along those lines. That's awesome. The midwife probably acted that way so she could stop future generations from being born with names like Old Battleaxe, although I bet with a name like that she got picked first in sports. All the senior midwives at my hospital had names like that. Old Battleaxe and Iron Lil were the 2 I remember most vividly. They'd been there since the place was built and were older than God and had absolutely no time for bullcrap. They kept the place impeccable and everyone up to and including the head of the NHS were frightened of them. I once saw Iron Lil take down a drunk and bullying boyfriend with a flying rugby tackle outside of the water birthing room. It was great. I would like to hear more stories about Iron Lil and Old Battleaxe, please. That sounds incredible. I want to hear all of your stories about these ladies. What awesome lives. My dad legitimately told my mum that my sister was to be either Jackie Ann after his ex or Lisa Marie after Elvis's daughter. I'm amazed that I was conceived after that. My sister is Lisa. Haha. I wanted to name my daughter Daisy, as it's always been my favorite. Even my husband loved the idea. My whole family said it was a dog's name and they wouldn't let it go, so I didn't name her Daisy. And here I am Pupatai Arevu Danambi, Kalia Perumal. Oh, hello, fellow South Indian person. I was almost named Cinderella. I have no idea what my dad was smoking at the time. My coworker went to school with a girl named Fallopia. I feel sorry for her, especially when she takes biology classes and they have to talk about fallopian tubes. I know a teacher who has an elementary-age student with an African name that unfortunately does not translate well into North American English. The kid's name is Akok Ring. And yes, I wish I was kidding. In my high school, there was a kid whose name sounded like the F word when pronounced in English. I kid you not, all of the teachers called him Lucky instead. I don't know the details because he was an upperclassman and I didn't know him personally. My mum wanted to name me Kirby, after her vacuum. Thankfully, my dad talked her out of it. I currently work with someone whose name is Immunique. I don't think any midwives or nurses were involved with the naming. I met a child called Immunique once. She was not the only one in her class of first graders named that. You could tell it already annoyed her as she had to spell it out to me and the other adults there. Well, color me surprised that there was more than one child with that name in a single educational institution. Does this come from a TV show or something? Is it the Khaleesi of the 1980s? My mom had to talk my dad out of wanting to name me Prudence. I wouldn't have minded being called Prudence, but that's just me. Now I have an even weirder name that nobody knows how to pronounce because of a popular TV show. I feel like going through high school being called Prude would have been rough though. At least they would have been able to pronounce my name correctly then. A senior guy I was friends with started calling me by an incorrect pronunciation of my first and last names as a joke. Now most of my band does it. It's funny but also confusing for people who don't know my actual name. When I got a solo in marching band, my name was announced over the speaker as that exact wrong pronunciation of my name. I just shared a look of annoyance with the drum major and accepted it as a fact of my life. Also, that senior came back after he graduated to help at band camp this year and educated the freshmen on my incorrect name that they were to call me. I was like, "Thanks, Michael, I really appreciate it." My mother's name. My grandmother wanted to name her Ishbel, and my grandfather wanted to name her Laura. So they got a baby name book, and the first name they agreed on would be her name. Her name is Wanda. My ex wanted to name my son Jagger, pronounced either Jagger or Jagger, or Schottenjagger. That was a no. Everyone talked me out of naming my daughter Evelyn, and a nickname Evie. It's a family name, but apparently it's for older women only. My wife and I both loved the name Evelyn, and it would have been our daughter's name, but a close coworker had her daughter 2 weeks prior to us and named her Evelyn first. We felt awkward picking the same name, so we settled on our second choice. Also, I think Evie is a cute nickname. Again, not quite what was being asked, but a friend of mine was almost called Apollo. To be fair, he was born on the day of the first moon landing in 1969, and his dad is Greek. His mum put her foot down, though, and he ended up being Alexander, which is still a good Greek name. Okay, technically Macedonian, but the Greeks claim him too. I was young and stupid in the 80s when my daughter was born. I really wanted to name her Frisbee, because I was just certain that Frisbee last name was going to be the coolest girl in school. Nothing ever came of my bad idea. My daughter's name is Jennifer now. My dad is the third, and I would have been the fourth if I was born a dude. He still wanted to name me Roberta Edwina, his female version. Yikes. When I was in basic training back in the early 2000s, there was a guy whose last name was Starcruiser. I found out from one of his division mates that his full name was Mercury Sun Starcruiser, and that his dad apparently was a massive Star Wars geek after seeing the original way back in the 70s, and that he'd legally changed his last name to Starcruiser. This guy was not in my division, but was in one of the ones that was housed in the same building my division was in, so I'd seen him a few times. Turns out he was also married, and she was in a different division at the time as well. What was the worst experience you had in elementary school? I was running around the playground, saw a couple of girls with a small milk carton between them, ran through and kicked it. Turns out they had a pet hamster or squirrel in it. I killed the pet right in front of them. I felt bad about that for my whole life, and I'm 54 now. My father did that. I'd just gotten a hamster and it was rolling around in one of those balls while we put the cage together. He came home from work and thought I got a sports ball or something and happily kicked it at me. I got a new hamster. Wanna play sports ball, son? Why would someone put a hamster inside a milk carton? They're just kids. They wanted to carry it around and figured that'd be fine. I was bullied a lot and also had a bad haircut. One day in class, all of us students were sitting in a line while the teacher spoke. Halfway through, the teacher stopped talking. He walked up to me and pulled on my hair, saying, "Is this for real?" He then erupted with laughter, and so did the rest of the class. As they all laughed at me, I felt mortified. I wanted to die. I will never forget that moment. I had terrible, terrible hair throughout my childhood at all different stages. And I had this happen in various situations where the teacher would add to how terrible it was by constantly questioning my hair and bringing attention to it during class in front of the other classmates. They allowed me to be constantly bullied by my classmates in front of them without doing a darn thing. I remember when I was in the 4th grade, my mum gave me my brother's lunch by accident. I asked if I could go to his classroom so we could swap. I knocked on the door and asked for him. At the time, I had very short, curly hair. My mother made me get it all cut off as I had head lice that she couldn't get rid of. I'm female. After I asked for him, a little boy asked, "Are you a girl or a boy?" The entire class erupted with laughter and pointed at me, most loudly the teacher, who was in hysterics. He just kept laughing too. I walked out and waited for my brother to come while I could hear them in the background. It was mortifying. Another time, my mum took me to a clothes shop where she knew the owner. He invited me out back as his sons were there with their pet mice. I spent about 30 minutes with them and we went to leave and he said, "You have a lovely son." Oh well, I'm a somewhat attractive woman now and the teacher who laughed at me was fired for his inappropriate behavior with students later. Sometimes karma is slow for people who have a rough time in school, if it happens at all. Glad things worked out for this nice lady. In 2nd grade, we sat at desks arranged in groups of 4 with 2 pairs of desks facing each other. I was grasping the front edge of the desk and this kid slammed his desk against my fingers. Not sure if it was intentional, but it really hurt. I started crying. The teacher noticed and instead of dealing with the situation in a sane way befitting a 2nd grade teacher, her punishment for the boy was to have me slam my desk against his fingers. I told her it was okay because what the frick, I really didn't want to do that, but she made me do it anyway. She was a terrible teacher. Damn, that's pretty effed up and traumatizing for a 2nd grader. What happened to her? Is she still around? I remember her being pretty old, so she's probably retired or dead by now. I loaded my pants in kindergarten. Then I stepped on it. Then I proceeded to walk it around the classroom. When asked if I did it, I denied the act even though the footprints led to me and my pants smelled pretty bad. I got sent home. Many of those kids probably don't remember, but some nights I lie in bed thinking about what might have been if I just went to the bathroom. I work in an elementary school now. A few years ago, one of the kindergarten teachers pulled me aside and told me, "I have a pooper in my class. I can't figure out who it is." Somehow, someone who didn't wear underwear with their pants was relieving themselves, and the logs were falling out of the leg pants and onto the floor. This was causing her stress because some kids would accidentally step in it and shred it around the classroom, making a mess. A few days later, the teacher was walking down the hall and catches my eye. She seemed less stressed than the previous couple of days. She came over to me and said, "So, I found the poopatrator today." It was as if he had no idea he was doing it. In other words, your experience isn't unheard of. I got really sick once. My mother sent me to school despite the fact that I felt awful. I walked into the bathroom, spewed all over the floor, and then proceeded to crap my pants. I locked myself in a stall until the teacher came, cleaned me up, and brought me to the nurse. One day as a child, I woke up feeling sick. Mum sends me to school anyway. I get there, immediately go to the nurse's office. They refuse to examine me without a pass from my teacher. I go across the building to my first class to get one, by which point I'm late. The teacher refuses to let me into the room without a pass from the principal's office. I go back across the building, spend a few minutes waiting in a crowd of fellow late students, go back to class, give teacher his pass, go back to the nurse's office, give nurse her pass, nurse examines me, immediately declares me highly contagious, and sends me back home. You're a lucky mother fricker. My mom forced me to go to school and I was sick with the flu. I felt sick and in the middle of class I silently threw up on my desk. I covered it for 15 minutes. When class ended, everyone left and the teacher confronted me, asking me what was wrong. I raised my head to have spew coming off my face and shirt. She starts gagging and I ran for the bathroom, leaving trails of spew. Worst day ever. There's one story that will always stick in my mind. I was in the 3rd grade and we were supposed to bring back signed permission slips from our trip to the library. The only person in class who didn't bring his permission slip was a friend of mine. My 3rd grade teacher thought it'd be appropriate to interrogate him in front of the entire class as to why he didn't bring it. He responded that he would be unable to attend and she continued to press him. All of a sudden, he bursts into tears and explains that he has to attend a funeral. You'd think she'd have the brains to stop there, right? Wrong. She still has the nerve to ask, "Whose?" I'll never forget the look on his face when he replies, "My mum's." I freaking hated that teacher so much for so many other reasons too. He moved about a week after that, and his father got in contact with our family, updating on their status, which wasn't exactly great. That was my worst experience. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for him. Oh gosh, this reminds me of a story. I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten through to the 6th grade. In the 3rd grade, 8, one of my friend's mothers died. Needless to say, the kid was out of school for a couple of weeks. When he finally returned, he was having a difficult time, obviously. One day during class, he was crying, and our female teacher told him to stop being such a baby and that his mother was no good anyways. I recall telling my mother about it because it really disturbed me at that age. Heck, it disturbs me now. I'm sorry, Paul. I hope you're doing great. I called my teacher Mom. I then tried to correct myself and referred to her as the names of several other teachers before shutting up and trying to phase into my chair. Haha, I as well called my teacher Mom once. Luckily it was the beginning of recess and most kids were hurrying to get outside, so most of them didn't hear it. Plus I was 5, almost 6, and super tiny for my age, which according to my teacher made my mistake the cutest thing ever. She even picked me up when the rest of the kids were outside. I was so flustered by my mistake that I hadn't even moved, and she said she wished she was my mom. She was a pretty cool teacher. I feel like this happens to greater than 1/3 of students, just by this cliché's appearance in media and how often you hear about it happening in general from your friends. Had a teacher tell me I was a slacker when all I wanted to do was mind my own business. She constantly took me out into the hall because I wasn't talking as much as I should, and lectured me how I was disturbing everyone else. Even had my parents come in at one point. Sorry I was a quiet kid, lady. So you were disturbing people with your silence. Yeah, I even burst into tears at one point. I didn't know what I was doing wrong and this lady didn't let up. It scarred me. I always go with the whole, "We're worried about you. You don't ask as many questions as the other kids" thing. Of course I was quiet, and I'd always think that the reason you ask questions in class is because you don't understand something. I understood everything as a child. Turns out they just wanted me to outwardly express a bit more interest. There was this lady at my school who taught special ed, who was a typical scary-faced witch. One day she took us to indoor recess, our normal teacher couldn't take us for some reason, and I was skipping happily like a normal child would do. She immediately scolds me and says that I can't play in recess. I had to sit in a chair in the corner of the gym while I watched all of my friends play some weird game. After the first round of the game was over, I got to go play with them because I assumed that my punishment wasn't as severe as sitting out the whole time. Nope, I was yelled at and told to sit back down. For skipping, like the happy child that I was. We had a teacher like that too. She was the special ed principal as well. She told lots of kids off for fast walking and made everyone sit for an extra 10 minutes at lunch so the owner of a chip packet would pick it up and scolded a kid who tried to pick it up and end the madness, and had to have the principal of the regular school tell her to wear a better brassiere. She was horrible and scary. Speech therapy. The kids in my grade level were pretty cool and didn't make fun of me for having a speech impediment. I was actually well liked. I only felt different during speech therapy. Nothing felt worse than when your teacher is standing in front of the class and the speech therapist has to interrupt the lesson to take you, and only you, out of the class. This happened on a weekly basis, mind you. I say this for all school-based speech-language pathologists. I'm so sorry for ever making you feel anything less than brilliant. We think we're helping. I try to take students from the same class out at the same time to make it seem more natural. Also, I try to make the sessions interesting and rewarding, so I hardly ever have a student who doesn't want to go to speech. Unless the class is in the middle of something new and super cool, then I engage in the activity with the class for a bit until there's a better stopping time. I've actually had 2 students fake having a trouble with a certain sound just so that they could see what speech was all about. However, no one can pull students out of the classroom at random, so their adorable attempt at getting out of class went unsuccessfully. Again, sorry for any hard feelings. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I didn't speak good English when I first moved to the US in 3rd grade. I didn't know that frick was a swear word. I used it casually. One time the teacher asked, Who first settled the town that I live in? I responded, the fricking British. I got suspended for 3 days. Pro tip, before moving to another country, learn which words are offensive and don't say them to your teacher. Your suspension seems pretty harsh for a new kid. That's a solid answer though, and you should stand by it. That's hilarious. I actually did something similar in 3rd grade. Having just moved to France, I asked in a rude way if I could go and take a leak. Je peux aller pisser? Not knowing that pisser was a swear word. I didn't get suspended or anything, but everyone in the class got a good laugh out of it. Some of my friends still bring it up now, about 12 years later. This butthole kid stabbed me in the shoulder with a metal fork during a snowball fight. Who brings a knife to a snowball fight? Only a lunatic, but a fork? It's understandable. I see you've played snowy, spoony, knifey, forky before. My mother sent me to school very sick one day, and I was having a horrible time to say the least. Nauseous, fever, cough, but I couldn't stay home as she had a very important job interview, so I pretended I was a lot better than I was for her. About half an hour into school, I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach. Oh God. I proceeded to walk over to where everyone kept their backpacks, where nobody could see me, found the nearest one, and filled it with my spew. I was a dumb kid, so I looked around to make sure no one saw. The storage was around the corner from the class desks, and they were having playmat time so nobody noticed me, and I put the poor kid's backpack back on its hook. 2 hours later during lunch, I heard a scream, followed by a couple of students getting sick all over the lunchroom tables and floor. And that boy whose bag I spewed in was crying his fricking eyes out. The teacher basically interrogated the class, and I finally burst into tears and admitted it was me. I was sent to the nurse, then detention, and my mother never looked so angry with me when she picked me up. As for the kid, he didn't talk to me for 2 weeks and then told me he hated me and that my spew smelled like his cat's litter box. We started dating 8 years later, and we're still together. Ha ha ha! In this more negative story grouping, it can be quite nice to come across the odd one that has a happy ending, so thanks for that. 3rd grade, we had chair desks. Look them up. Mine had a lot of clutter under the seat, and the teacher told me to clean it before class was over. Now, I wasn't going very fast, but I didn't have much time either. The bell rang and I was still cleaning. The teacher got really angry at me. I don't remember what she said, but she was mad. Really furious. She picked up the whole desk, I fell out, and she dumps everything out of it and onto me, then throws it down. The desk slammed into the ground inches to my side. Needless to say, I was terrified by this whole thing. I told my mum told the principal, and they called the police. But I was too scared to say a word to the officers. I just bawled into my mum's arm. With nothing from me, there wasn't much they could do. At least I was moved to a different class. My 1st grade teacher also used to dump students' desks, sometimes with students still in them, out as well. She was a C-word. I'm sorry you had to experience this too. I will never understand why people like that decide to work with children if they hate them so much. Some of them just don't know they hate children until they've spent a decade teaching them. Okay, so my 1st grade teacher was a total butthead who was constantly doing things that probably should have gotten him fired, like telling the entire class that they should never be like me and using my art project as an example of what everyone shouldn't do, singling me out, openly mocking me, and my family in front of class, forcing me to go to a kindergarten class so he could use me as a bad example there, among other things. I'm almost positive that he hated me. The worst thing, though, happened one day during our math time. I was in the advanced math class and had already learned what we, as a class, were doing on a worksheet. Because of this, I worked ahead and finished it before the other kids. This prompted him to take my sheet, scream at me for working ahead of the class or not paying attention, violently rip up my worksheet, throw it to the garbage, and make me start over. It was more humiliating than anything up to that point, and the only time I'd ever been punished for being smart. In conclusion, my 1st grade teacher was literally a walking, talking sphincter. My teacher did something similar to me in 6th grade. I went to a private Christian school that was known for being less academically advanced than the other schools in the area, and I was pretty far ahead of a lot of the people in my grade. I also had ADHD, diagnosed but untreated, so during lectures I'd get bored and quietly work ahead. The teacher caught me one day and ripped up my work in front of the class in the middle of her lecture. I told my mom and the teacher ended up getting fired. Sort of a last straw deal, I guess. Good riddance. Frick you, Mrs. Myers. I remember another time I was reading after finishing my work, and she confiscated my book and made some sort of snide comment about it. She was mad that I wasn't double-checking my work. I ended up going to the principal and he got it back from me since Mrs. Myers refused to give it up until the end of the week, even though it was a library book. Oh my god, frick you, Mrs. Myers again. I had long hair in kindergarten or first grade, I can't quite remember, but a kid used to always tease me about it, saying I looked like a girl. I'm a dude. Anyway, I dragged him out into our little cubby space in class and gave him a haircut with safety scissors. The old ones cut hair pretty well. Got in a ton of trouble. By the way, if you lived in Las Vegas 20 years ago and this was you, my bad. You don't lie about those scissors. When I was really young and coloring in class, I think this was in kindergarten, I was getting annoyed at my hair for falling in my face, so I just grabbed the safety scissors and gave myself bangs. According to the teacher, I did a really good job at them too. When I was a kid, I was sloppy and disorganized. It wasn't on purpose. I just for some reason felt compelled to shove papers in my desk at school rather than sort them out. I was embarrassed by it and didn't want anyone to look at my desk. Like all kids, I had a crush. My crush that year was a kid named Johnny. I wrote his name in my notebook with little hearts all around it, and it became part of the mass of crumpled up papers in my desk that I'd forgotten about. One day, in the middle of class, my evil witch of a teacher noticed that my desk was sloppy, again, and decided to embarrass me by dumping out all of the contents of my desk right in front of the entire class, and then going through all of the papers one by one and reading them out loud. Eventually, she came across the paper that had Johnny's name written on it and said, "Ah, looks like someone has a crush on Johnny," out loud to the entire class. I turned bright red and tried to take the papers out of her hand, which apparently offended her, so she told me to get my hands off her. Kids never stopped teasing me after that. I couldn't even look at Johnny without blushing and wanting to cry. Fricking hate that B-word to this day. A group of boys who were a few years older than me, I was 6 and they were 12, would relentlessly chase me around the school every lunchtime. I'd hide in the toilets until I was sure they got bored of waiting. I told teachers, but they never did anything. Honestly, I lived in fear of them all year until they left for high school. They were double my age and like 3 times my size. It was horrible. Something similar happened with my little brother. He was in the 2nd grade and these 2 5th graders were cutting in line in front of my brother and his friends. My brother, knowing this is wrong, tells the 5th grader that they can't cut in line. Somehow, one of the 5th graders decides to hit my brother, and my brother hit him back, and they started fighting until a lunch lady stopped them. They both got a 3-day in-school suspension. If they hit you first, then you can hit them back in defense. Now that I think about it, this situation isn't that similar to yours, but oh well, I'm still sorry it happened to you. I wonder if bullying is more or less the same in the modern day and age compared to how it was when I, and the writers of these posts, were in school in the 90s or earlier. I can't help but feel like teachers have much stricter training on how to deal with this sort of thing in most countries now. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a crush on this one girl, and when we were on a field trip, I saw this ladybug ring for sale. I bought it knowing she liked ladybugs and waited for the right time to give it to her. I ended up doing it at the end of the field trip as we were gathering our stuff in front of her friends. She laughed in my face and refused the gift. I felt like crap and threw it out. In the 1st grade, I went to this private church school where all of the teachers were relatively strict about rules, and kids leaving class to go to the restroom among other things. One day, during singing time, I really had to go pee. I asked the teacher politely if I could use the restroom real quick and promised to be right back. The teacher told me I'd have to wait until recess to use it. Recess was right after singing time. While singing time is going on, a giant thunderstorm moves in and begins a torrential downpour, while the teacher thinks it would be a great idea for the class to sing the rainy day song to coincide with the storm. As the class is singing the song, I try as hard as I can not to think about how badly I need to pee and begin trying to count the grains of wood in my desk. Needless to say, it didn't help. About halfway through the rainy day song, and when the torrential downpour outside was at its worst, I ended up peeing my pants and creating a giant pool of pee beneath my desk. I was in tears, and when the teacher noticed what had happened, I was immediately taken down to the office to get a change of clothes. Since I was a girl and happened to be wearing a dress that day, I ended up having to wear some Polynesian top meant for a boy and boy shorts. My 4th grade teacher would always ridicule me in front of the class for not being able to learn my multiplication tables. I'm dyscalculic. I hated 4th grade so much. It was a nightmare. I crapped my pants while doing a speech in front of the class. My teacher had not one sympathetic bone in her body and treated me as if I'd punched her elderly mother in the face. I was a bathroom monitor with my friend. He took the boy one, I had the girl one, and they were obviously next to each other. We were just talking and messing around, and at one point I jokingly held his shoulders for whatever reason, and this teacher starts screaming down the hall for me to let go of him, what am I doing, etc. I also had the meanest first grader teacher who didn't believe that I wasn't bullying him, and kept demanding that I do to her what I did to him to prove it. I still freaking hate both of those teachers. My kindergarten teacher changed my card from green to yellow because I tugged at another girl's t-shirt to tell her that I thought it was pretty. I'm gotta be honest, I flipped out like SpongeBob did in that one episode where he got a good noodle star taken away. Massage therapists and customers, what was your strangest experience during the process? I'm a male companion for hire and give special massages. My prices are very high compared to a regular massage, and no one can really mistake what you're buying. Also, the website I advertise on is full of undressed buff dudes, so there's really no confusion. Well, one day I receive a call from a man asking if I'm available. He said he'd like a massage at his office in the middle of downtown. I didn't think much of this as I've done this kink for a few people before. They normally run a small business and nobody is there at that time of night. Innocent enough. But this guy requested it to be at lunch and gave me the address to a bustling building. When I arrived, it was filled with people in a beautiful open space office. I brought my massage table and people were making light conversation with me thinking I'm a legit masseuse. This was way out of my comfort zone. I'm used to dealing with pervy guys in dim-lit rooms, not talking to Karen and her friends interested in booking a massage. When I finally met the guy, he led me through to a maze of people and departments. Everyone was staring as I was dressed like a man-ho, while everyone else was in business attire. Tank top, grey sweats, and no underwear. Gotta dress the part, you know? He leads me to an open room that had been converted into a massage area, meaning there's no doors, just a paper curtain divider that blocks the view from his co-workers. I started the massage and was thinking, he can't possibly think I would do anything here, right? This is insane. After 30 minutes, I get a sense that something is off. I'd glide my hands to more intimate areas, but he keeps talking casually. Most guys would pop a tent, or ask to be massaged near their groin, or start touching my junk. But he was talking about his wife and daughters. I immediately asked him how he found out about me. He told me it was a recommendation from one of his friends, then started going on about his relationship with this guy and how they have a very strong friendship, and that they would constantly prank each other. I froze and my heart dropped. This guy thinks this is a legit massage. This was supposed to be a prank that somehow got way too advanced without any party knowing. Hence why I'm in the middle of a tech office and he's so nonchalant about everything. I immediately went real masseuse and focused on his knots for the remainder of the time. He paid me my ridiculous fee and made a small comment about it being expensive for a massage, but it was good and convenient. I was beyond terrified as I was seconds away from doing some highly inappropriate things to this man right in the middle of his office, feet from his co-workers. This is my most eerie experience I've had yet. What's the strangest experience during the massage process? The one where the guy didn't try to do the deed with me. Did you level with him after and explain what you were actually there for? It seems like that would have been a great way to get an extra tip or something. I know I would have really appreciated knowing about that. No, I thought it might be way too embarrassing for him, especially at work. Instead, I really tried to give him the best massage possible and speak nothing of this. Until now. That is brilliant. I would have gently let him know at the end, or perhaps the client, blissfully unaware, recommended this gentleman onward at his usual rates and everyone profited. Not a massage therapist, but my dad is, and this is one of his favorite stories. When his clients come in, he gives them a list of Pandora stations to choose from for the session. A client comes in one day and picks 50s jazz, so like Ella Fitzgerald and stuff. The thing about some of these women from the 50s, some of their songs were not so subtly raunchy. One comes in and it's about a woman asking her lover when he's coming home, but she's singing lines like, "When are you gonna come? I can't wait for you to come. Come for me, baby. I love it when you come for me." He's in the middle of working on this woman's glutes when the song comes on and pauses to see if she's awake. She hasn't said anything for a while, so he figures she's just gone to sleep. It's a pain to stop what he's in the middle of working on, walk over to the phone and wipe all the massage oil from his fingers just to skip the song, so he makes a mental note to remove it from the playlist and keeps working. A few minutes later, when the song reaches its climax of a woman begging her lover to come, his massage bottle runs out of oil. Not a problem, he always keeps a spare on his hip because this happens. The thing is, sometimes when the bottle is being filled up, a bubble of air gets caught in the tube inside and it comes out with the first pump. He goes to pump the oil into his hand, and a mixture of oil and air comes out with a loud splooge sound, like a cartoonish imitation of a man reaching completion. He freezes, one hand on the pump and the other on this woman's butt. She didn't react, so again he thinks she's probably asleep. Then her entire body starts shaking with laughter. They're both laughing so hard they need to take a break from the massage to compose themselves. Thank God she was chill and found it just as funny as he did. I had a very eccentric, read creepy as frick client who came into our clinic one day wanting a Tui Na massage, type of Chinese massage. We usually leave the room to let the clients strip down into underwear before we commence, but with this guy I had no chance to get away. Before I had time to give him the towel, he dropped his pants to reveal a sparkling blue G-string that barely kept everything in place. The guy was about 58, huge beer gut, grey hair, gold earrings, and hairy like Robin Williams. As I started the massage, the guy started to tell me that he worked as a bedroom masseuse specializing in body slide massage. This is where the masseuse gets oiled up and rubs his body and fun bits all over before doing the deed with the client at the end. The whole time I was massaging him, he kept telling me that I was really good with my hands. He also repeatedly told me how good he was at his job and plugging his business with a hinting tone. A very awkward session.
I enjoy a good butt massage, but I don't enjoy the amount of focus it takes to keep it at half-mast, at most for 90 minutes, instead of enjoying the massage so the undies stay on the bundies.
I'm a licensed massage therapist. Seriously, let yourself relax. We've seen it all and we don't judge. Yes, whenever I see this happen to someone, I might get a little excited too because we're all human. But because I'm a licensed massage therapist, it's my responsibility and profession to ignore all indecent but natural aspects and continue to focus on the fundamental muscles during the massage. We're all human. Massage is obviously a delicate topic, so when we establish the expectations and boundaries before the massage begins, everyone can feel safe and know exactly what will and won't happen. I can never do this relaxing thing. I always decline any glute and thigh workout out of guilt. There's no problem with that. Professionally trained licensed massage therapists will never touch you anywhere you don't want to be touched. We discuss the full parameters of the session before the session begins. No surprises, just relaxation. It's common to have difficulty relaxing, and that's why it's recommended to book a 90-minute or 120-minute massage, because people often don't begin to relax until 45 minutes into the session. This is a therapeutic human touch. It's safe, it's beneficial. Every human needs human touch, and the client has full control over everything. Massage therapists are professionally trained to respect every client, make you feel safe and comfortable, never do anything you don't want to do. I had a guy tell me, "Stop teasing, you know exactly what you're doing, don't start me up and not finish." Studying to be licensed, but I volunteer my services at a harm reduction clinic. From 7 through 9 p.m. I work at a massage palace as the receptionist. People used to come in all the time to ask how much massages were, and usually that was the extent of the conversation. One day a bloke walked in and asked how much the massages were, so I told him. Then he asked me in an overly friendly voice if I did the massages. I naively plowed on with, "No, not me, they're done by..." When my boss walked out of the consultation room he'd been in with a client and said, "I do the massages, can I help you?" The guy looked instantly sheepish and couldn't get out the door fast enough. My boss said he'd overheard the guy ask if I did the massages and knew something wasn't right. Told me that if that ever happened again, to just say I would get the masseur for him and walk out. I'm so glad your boss was awesome, to be honest. Yeah, he was a good guy all round. He said they don't come in often, but you get the odd one. All 3 masseurs were men and they were all nice guys, so I was well looked after. What a gross weirdo. Look, as the first story indicated, more intimate masseurs do exist, but don't go in expecting if it's not advertised, folks. I do home visits. I'm a male masseur, by the way. Had a particular client 3 times. Usually I have clients stripped down to their undies. The second session, he got undressed, but I didn't think much of it as he seemed okay. At the end of the third session, as I was massaging his neck while he's on his back, he just started cranking it. I was kind of shocked in the moment and didn't know what to do. He reached for my hand as if to get me to finish him off, and at that point I stood up and said I've got to go. Was fairly awkward waiting for him to get dressed so I could pack my table and get my money and leave. I've had a couple of incidents in my 5 years. Female therapists would have it much worse. Sucks that massage is associated with that sort of thing because I really like helping people overcome aches and mobility issues, but it's hard to advertise without getting calls from guys wanting their eggplant tugged. My girlfriend is an LAC and this dude used to come in and get acupuncture and crank it during the session. It never had anything to do with her, and he never asked her help or anything. He just needed to be getting needled while he was doing it. He paid her a lot more than her usual sessions and apparently had trouble getting off otherwise. He is almost 40 years her senior, and I've heard their sessions before. He truly just needed acupuncture to get off. She was never super comfortable with it, but it was good money, and eventually we didn't need that money, so she put a stop to it. He was totally respectful of that too. He never made a move and was always communicating very openly and honestly about what he needed. Pretty nice guy, if not a bit strange. He needed acupuncture to get off. What a prick. I live in China, and despite this idea of happy endings places, they're getting harder and harder to find in Shanghai, thank God. Massages here are as normal as going bowling or going for a coffee. It's fantastic and I have at least 2 a month. Nothing more lovely than a 90-foot massage. I usually fall asleep.
What's a 90-foot massage in metric units?
They parade 45 Chinese ladies down your back.
Or occasionally 15 old women using walkers.
Nothing more lovely than a 27 1/3 of AmITheA massage. I usually fall asleep. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My parents own a spa that I used to work at. I have a crap ton of stories, but here's a goodie. At one point, we had 2 male massage therapists. Now, I worked in the call center, and before booking a massage, we'd always clarify if the client was comfortable seeing a male massage therapist, as we had a majority female clientele. But one day, this male client booked a massage for himself with our male therapist, Ed. He was a new client and actually requested a male. Whatever. Guy goes in for his appointment, and the first half is normal. The guy is undressed on the table, with a blanket covering his lower half. First half of the massage, he's on his stomach. Then Ed tells him to go ahead and flip over on his back to continue. This fricker flips over and hands Ed a wad of cash from who knows where, saying, "That's for you," and starts to feed the goose. Ed promptly said, "Alright, your appointment is done, they'll take care of you at the front desk," and books it out of there. The guy pays and leaves with no problem. Here's the kicker. Ed never told my parents, a manager, nothing. We only found out through work gossip. But because we didn't know about this creep, the guy ended up calling and scheduling another appointment with Ed. We found out shortly after booking the scoop, and the guy was asked to not come back. The spa's a pretty upscale place in the triple-digit price range, so not sure if the guy just thought we were an expensive spa with a side hustle or a really cheap brothel. They'll take care of you at the front desk.
Well, this is a strange joint.
Walks over to the front desk with his junk out. I get a call from my friend one night. Her boss wants a massage, and she recommended me. Since he's my friend's boss, I don't really worry too much, and head over to this dude's place with my gear. When I first come in and have everything set up, the guy offers me a Vegas bomb. I pass, and the massage starts as normal. Everything is going normal. This guy was Indian, I think, and was saying how this is great. He would recommend me to all his friends and stuff. But about halfway through, I hear, "Do you do happy ending?" My hands just froze. No one had ever asked me that before. My friends make jokes and all, but I'd never had this conversation with the client seriously asking this. The conversation goes like this. "Do you do a happy ending?" No. "Why not?" "Because that's disgusting and unprofessional." "I'll pay extra." "We're done here." I stopped the massage, packed up my gear, told him to pay the full price and left. Once I was home, I called up my friend to tell her what a creep her boss was. She started laughing her butt off. Apparently he had asked her if I did happy endings, and she thought he was joking and joked back yes.
Comparing to the other posts in this thing, at least he asked.
I was previously a certified massage therapist and nothing creepy or raunchy. I've been physically attracted to clients before, but it's drilled into your head that this is absolutely not the setting to pursue this. There was maybe one odd thing that isn't at all odd, but was similarly distracting to me. I always drape the client so the top of the sheet is up to their armpits. So guys, and girls obviously, have their chests covered. This one guy though kept folding the sheet down to just under his chest. I'd keep moving him and adjusting the sheet, but he would eventually fold it back down. The edge of the sheet perfectly underlined his moobs, and I just kept getting distracted by them. They were like 2 eyes staring at me.
I have a rare medical condition where I breathe through my chest. I once had a massage therapist repeatedly try to suffocate me.
I wonder if the chest had a particularly chiseled set of pecs and thought that they needed to be admired by the world. Although it's more likely a sensitivity thing, right? My wife and I were at a small resort in Costa Rica. When we go on vacations, she always gets massages, but I never do. This time we decided to get a couple's massage. We get in the room, and the 2 are waiting for us by each table. She had this Latin love god, and I got a cute girl in her early 30s. They tell us to take off our clothes and give us these little paper undies, and then leave the room. The room was nice, it had a little fountain with some foliage and some soothing sound from speakers. We each looked at the paper undies and laughed and decided to forego them, it just seemed too silly. They started the massage and it felt good. She'd stretch my arm and then start working it, first going over it lightly, then gradually getting harder. The time came to do my butt. She moved the towel down and started massaging my cheeks, then the inside of my cheeks, which I thought was odd, but I'm new to the massage world and maybe that's what a deep tissue massage was. At this time I'm starting to feel, not relaxed but insecure. I suddenly became aware of my wife next to me who sounds more than relaxed. Meanwhile, back at my butt, she was doing the inside of the cheeks well. I'd hoped this was the last spot she'd do there, the last thing I want is butt cheek sweat rubbed all over my body. Then she started to press down on my actual butthole. I felt pressure building up behind her thumb. I clench, and I clench like I've never clenched before. I spin around and say very politely, "Thank you for the massage." My wife, "Our spa time isn't up yet," and I told her we have to go now. I told my wife what happened and she laughed at me and said, "Only to you." And now this is her favorite story to tell. Wife, do you remember that time we went on vacation and that cute girl finger blasted you in your turd cutter? Why must you bring that up every Thanksgiving? Someone I know, they're female, said that while doing a Brazilian wax on a male, he arrived. She just wiped it up and remained professional. I don't know how. I mean, you can't control stuff like that, it's biology. So long as he was apologetic about it and not creepy, I don't see this being a big deal. I have a friend who is a licensed massage therapist and has been studying medicine and been around doctors for much of his life. One of his sessions with a regular female client, while she was face down and he was in front of her, by her head, working on her back, she reached up and grabbed his butt. He asked what she was doing and she said, "Sorry, I don't know, I couldn't help myself." He told her not to do that again and the rest of the session continued as normal. At the end of the session, he got her a glass of water and as he turned around to leave, she grabbed his butt again. She apologized and seemed genuinely upset and embarrassed and insisted that she just couldn't help herself. My friend ponders for a moment before doing a peripheral vision check on her. Her vision is way below what is normal. The massage therapist calls the client's husband and suggests that they go see a doctor, because there might be something wrong with her impulse control and vision, suggesting it might be some sort of frontal lobe problem. Sure enough, a few days later she had an MRI and there was a tumor developing in her frontal lobe. Glioblastoma, I think. I forget the exact medical language he used, it was removed and she's doing fine now. Believe me or not, I had a massage with a girl once and she was new. Before I flipped over from my stomach, she whispers, "Anything else I can do or focus on before you turn over?" Based on the place being one of the most popular places nationwide, I figured she meant it in a strictly professional manner. I said no, I turned over and she massaged my legs, no problems. But when she does my arms, she rests my hands on her chest slightly, and I had to think about my grandma so hard to keep from getting in trouble. We finished the massage and I left. I rescheduled and got her again a few weeks later, and she had changed up her style to rest my arm on her rolling chair for that. So someone must have mentioned something. When I was in school, I'd place an ad for in-home services as a means for getting me more practice and also to make some extra cash on the side. I did this while working 40 hours a week and going to school 10 hours a day on my days off. It was a pretty exhausting few months. Because I went to people's homes, I had some pretty specific steps about how I screened clients, being very clear about what services I was giving. It's a relaxation massage booked by the hour. I bring my table and you're fully draped up during this. Most people that were looking for something more were pretty upfront and rarely pushy, but I ended up with some good clients that were just busy or traveled into town regularly and didn't have time to visit a spa. One Friday, I was home in the evening and laying down for a nap when my phone rang with someone looking to book an appointment. I gave them the spiel about what I offered and prices, and he asked if he could get a massage without the blanket. Some people ask this, so I always liked to bring up how cold someone tends to get during a massage. The draping is for privacy. If you get overheated, I can just drape your waist, etc. When they hear this, most people got the point or were understanding. He was mildly fussy about the sheet, so I offered draping his waist with a towel. He responded saying this was fine, but I could. The phone started breaking up. I checked to see if he was still there. He was. We just hit a bad reception patch, no big deal. I confirmed the time and place and set the appointment for around 8 p.m. When I arrived at the client's townhouse, I woke up and I heard loud music playing. All I'm thinking of is that I hope he can hear me as I knock on the door, which opened to blast my ears with smooth R&B and revealed an old white man wearing a sleeveless coral shirt with ruffles. It looked like something an older woman would pick up from Walmart to dress casually in. I think nothing of it. Who am I to judge what weird clothes this guy wants to wear? And walk in, also noticing he's not wearing pants. Okay, whatever, he's Donald ducking around his apartment getting ready for a massage. But he's clearly wearing some kind of undies, so I don't acknowledge it. As I set up my table, focusing on my work rather than his odd attire, I make polite conversation. As I'm ready to go, I say that I need to change the music so I can focus and he can relax, and that I'll wash my hands. While I do that, he can climb onto the table and get under the towel on his back. This is when I turn to change the CD in his player, and I can see out of the corner of my eyes, as he took off the top, that he's wearing underneath the frilliest pair of lacy panties. This is not the most normal of situations, but I think I have two options. 1. This guy is a weirdo pervert and wants to get a reaction out of me for wearing something shocking. 2. This guy is into wearing ladies' clothing and this is how he gets to be in private. No matter what the actual answer, my best course of action is to not acknowledge his attire and go about the session. I worked through, did my routine as normal while he was on his back and focused on my work. For the most part, it was pretty standard massage, though I did have to fight the compulsion to flip the tag of his panties back inside his underwear, lest I call attention to them. But when I did this, he kept splaying his legs out, which, when I wasn't thinking, gave me a glance at his berries hanging out from that lace. His legs were pushed back together and I kept my eyes on the floor after that. At the end of the session, I cleaned up quickly, thanked him, collected my money, and left. At the end of it, he paid me 3 times my rate, which was nice. It was still an awkward session, though. In conclusion, I made money giving a normal massage to a guy wearing women's lingerie. I still don't know if it was a kink or his lifestyle. What's your most embarrassing doctor's office story?
So, yesterday I went to the doctor for some intestinal bleeding. My doctor is fairly new to the office, and I've only met her once before this. I'm only 21, so I've never had a reason for a doctor to go knuckle deep in my rectum before, but the doctor insisted that it needed to be done for some tests. So I bend over the table and she lubes up and digs for treasure. I hadn't dropped one out in a day or so because it hurts when I do so I was a bit stopped up. Upon starting to pull out, I immediately realized what's about to happen and try everything in my power to stop it. Too late. Doctor pulls her finger out and plop, out lands a turd right on the floor. I was able to hold back the rest, but the damage was done. In conclusion, dropped a steaming hot log right on the floor of my doctor's office.
Mine's not so much embarrassing as it is awesome. I had the mumps during my first year of college, and along with that I got orchitis, the swelling of the testicles caused by the mumps, in my left nut, which swelled up to the size of a potato. It was really painful and heavy, so I had to carry it everywhere for a while. So I went to the doctor's. He checked my mumps, and then I told him there was another problem. I dropped trow, lay on the doctor bed thing, and he came over to examine. He laughed when he saw it, because it was frickin' huge, and he said, "What seems to be the problem?" jokingly. At that moment, I pointed to my regular-sized bollock and said, "This one shrank." Cue the 5-minute laughter from the doc. When I turned 30, I suddenly became a hypochondriac. I thought that everything was cancer or worse. So I'm seeing my doctor, who was a racquetball buddy, for my annual physical, and I mentioned that I was having some pains in the left side of my chest. I asked him, "I know this is rare, but could it be breast cancer?" I'm male, by the way. He felt around seriously, and then, with an absolutely straight face, he asked me, "Does the pain hurt worse when you're on your time of the month?" That was pretty much the end of my year of hypochondria. I had to go to the specialist urologist due to a pain in my ding-dong. My wife, who's awesome, accompanied me for support. The doc was at a teaching hospital, so he asked her if a couple of med students could observe the exam. I say, okay. My dignity was already at a new low anyway, so why not? I drop trow and the doc starts yanking and a-pullin' on mini-me. He takes some notes and then directs the 2 med students to cop a feel right where he did. I happen to look over at my wife, who's trying to stifle a smile while watching 3 dudes essentially whack me off. In conclusion, my insurance paid for the most awkward hand action in the history of time, while my wife watched. Well, whatever floats your wife's boat, I guess. Nothing like a mass audience for an inspection of one's manhood. On to the next story. This actually occurred shortly after I was born, and we refer to it as the green pea incident. My brother, 2 years old, was moving to solid foods and absolutely loved peas. Mushed, boiled, fried, or in things, he loved them. One day, my mum noticed that my brother wasn't going to the washroom. No big deal, she thought, it's been a day. 2 days later, nothing's coming out. He kept eating and eating like the happy little fat toddler that he was, eating all amounts of peas. My parents scheduled a day off work and took him to the doctor together. The doctor, of course, says that he must be constipated. It happens to the best of us. At this point, it's been 4 days since the little brat has taken one. The doctor gives him a large dose of prescription-strength X-Lax and suggests that they should probably keep an eye on him for the next while. As he's talking to my parents about what they should do, my brother starts to relieve himself. Bright, neon green crap. He had eaten so many peas that the fiber had actually clogged him up, and now it was returning in force. The semi-liquidated crap started flying out faster and faster, like you see in those comedy movies. Eventually, it settled down to a light stream, but not before his crap mist had covered the entire wall next to the examination table. Neon green crap mist. All over the doctor's tools, his blood pressure stuff, and his posters. It ruined the cushions on the table, and stank to high heck. My parents never went back to that doctor again. In conclusion, neon green crap mist.
I think after such a performance, you'd be obligated to give that doctor your business for the rest of your life.
A friend of mine mistakenly called her gynecologist instead of her dentist to make an appointment, and started the call by admitting she was overdue for a cleaning. Ugh. When I was brought up from being under anesthesia after getting my wisdom teeth out and before my transportation back home arrived, I recovered enough to unplug my IV and various sensor doodads, and wandered into the waiting room asking for some oral action. The nurse promptly gathered me back into my room, and I recall complaining that someone might have said yes, and I deserve the right to know. I remember my girlfriend and doctor laughing at me in the recovery room. I thought I was being completely logical, and I still don't know what I was saying. This story makes me not want to know. My father was getting his prostate checked out by this pretty good-looking female urologist. She had to insert a catheter since my dad was having trouble peeing. Anyway, she removed the catheter once they're done, and my dad starts peeing all over the doctor's leg. She took it like a champ and told him, "If I don't get peed on at least once a day, my husband will suspect I'm ditching work to have an affair." I can't imagine her actually having an affair. "Quickly now, pee on my leg, he won't suspect a thing." When I was newly pregnant with my daughter, I was at my OB's office for a pelvic exam. After I stirrup up, my doc is knuckle-deep in me and says, "Oh, you'll be fine if you have a big baby. There's plenty of room in here." I'm sure she meant that I have a wide pelvic arch and would have no trouble with a normal, natural delivery, but what I heard was, "Wow, I see dozens of these every day, but you have a huge, gaping hoo-ha." Last time I went to the OB or gyn, the doctor, female, just shoved her fingers in me without any warning so she could check my ovaries. I'm used to having doctors that do my exams at least warn me a little before they just cram stuff up in there. But nope, not her. After that wonderful incident, she pulls off her gloves and goes, "Wow, you're extremely tight. If you ever have a child, I would never suggest you give birth that way." Didn't even understand that she'd alarmed me in my hoo-ha, so how the heck was it supposed to be relaxed in any way? I'm definitely finding a new OB-GYN this year. One day, I was visiting a new doctor and he asked me to remove my trousers. I obliged, knowing that he'd probably check me for a hernia and make sure I didn't have a third ball or something. I'd forgotten that the night before, I'd shaved off exactly 1/2 of my hair down there. As my brain started to panic and he begins fiddling around, the doctor looks up at me and says, "It's easy to start, but it's hard to finish, isn't it?" While cauterizing the hole during my vasectomy, my skin smoked more than it should have, set off the fire alarm, and I ended up with numerous people of numerous career choices in the room with my exposed nutsack. "You should have said your wang was the new pope." "Oh, I figured that was implied." Oh gosh, I wonder if you wanted to undo your vasectomy after that, whether you'd actually be able to. That sounds serious, yikes. When my wife was in the final stages of labor, it seemed to be taking forever. I slipped out of the birthing suite to get some fresh air and make a couple of phone calls. They made me turn off my cell inside. A nurse came running and said to me, "Quick, come back, it's all happening." And they rushed me into a room where I was confronted with a huge hairy hoo-ha, from which a beautifully bushy, dark-haired Mexican baby literally fired out of the birth canal like a rocket. I'm going, "What the frick?" when the doctor hands me scissors to cut the umbilical cord. Well, that was fun, I thought, as I discreetly slipped out of the room and into the next room where my wife was still hours away from producing. Doctors and balls, man. Back in college, I was showering one evening and noticed a lump on one of my testes, which wasn't there before. I immediately assumed the worst, as you probably should with a lump suddenly appearing on your body, and made an appearance with the school clinic the next day. I'd already said my goodbyes to the little guy, and I was ready to have him removed. "Sorry, dude, if you're a life-threatening illness, you're destroying this body and you have to go. Good luck, long live and prosper, etc." Now I'm older, and I wouldn't really give a frick if I went full mast during an exam. I'd be all like, "Hey, yeah, still got it, hey? Hey?" Being an unrepentant pervert in situations like that is one of the great parts of getting older, but that's not part of this story. Anyway, I didn't really want to get hard or generally go showing my wang to strangers, but I also didn't want to die. First doctor to examine me looked exactly like the doctor on Battlestar Galactica, old, grizzled, and handles way too many nuts to care about mine. "Why don't they turn up the gosh darn temperature?" he tells me as he grapples with a man purse as hard and shriveled as a walnut. I swear to God, he had me in one hand and was bracing himself against the exam table with his knee as he pulled. "I'm going to breathe on it if it doesn't loosen up soon," he told me. Mercifully, it released its iron grip on my balls just long enough to avoid the hot breath of an old man on my junk. Yep, that's a lump. Go get an ultrasound. Needless to say, okay, maybe not on the internet, no half-masts were popped during that day. So I went to get the ultrasound. I sat around in a waiting room full of expecting women, all looking at me like, "Why are you here?" Finally, the doctor, a 4-foot woman who was the spitting image of my best friend's mum, calls me into the exam room, where I am to disrobe, surrounded by framed posters of innocent babies, and my cancerous eggplant. If you've had or seen an ultrasound, you know that they put some KY jelly on the surface and apply a wand that is vibrating at a very high frequency. If you've had your friend's mum give you an ultrasound right on your member, you know that she also had to grapple with your slippery, walnut-hard, turn-down the AC sack, and kept slapping your manhood out of the way as it flopped around. Finally, I'm like, I'll just hold myself out of the way. Unfortunately, this doctor didn't have any sack experience, only on babies, she admitted, so she called in the pro, a 30-something ex-frat boy. "Hey, nice member, man," he said, entering the sacred space where parents catch a first glimpse of their soon-to-be progeny. "Now, let's have a look at that sack. Okay, in a situation like this, you want to get your hands warmed up and cup them. You see? Yeah, that's how it's done. Okay, now you want to gently grasp the nut and just kind of work the wand over it like, oh hey dude, look, it's your right nut." He turns the monitor so I can see it. "That is a perfectly healthy testes. It looks flawless. Okay, now you try." Anyhow, they go back and forth, squeezing 2 full tubes of KY jelly onto my jewels. It kept making a farty noise when they squeezed it because they were just ham-fisting it, like some subhuman people do with tubes of toothpaste. It took them about 30 minutes of nut wandering to conclude the training session. Finally, they get around to the nut with the actual problem. "Oh yeah, that's it right there. Look at that. Oh yeah, that's definitely a cyst for sure." I'm all thinking, a cyst? Oh my gosh, I didn't read about that. You will not find anything about cysts when searching "what is this lump on my sack," and I thought I was going to die. The doctor is like, "You have a cyst, you can go." And I was like, do I need to do something about this?" His reply, "Not unless you want some butthole mucking around with your scrotum for no reason." It was a benign cyst that I still have. Nobody that isn't feeling my testes would know that it was there. Nothing to worry about. In conclusion, not unless you want some butthole mucking around with your testes for no reason. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was in the waiting room of the hospital for a broken toe, I saw a somewhat elderly man, think 50s or 60s, come up to the nurse's desk and cough quietly. She waved him off as a sign to tell him to wait a minute, and he started to pace nervously. He was able to catch a male nurse walking by and try to discreetly tell him he needed immediate medical attention. I was wondering why the guy was so antsy, and that's when I noticed it. The guy had a mixture of brown and red fluid leaking down the back of his thigh from his shorts. The male nurse asked him to speak up, and even though he was quiet, I heard him mutter, "I've got a toy so far up my butt that I can't reach it, and I don't want the entire gosh darn hospital to know about it." The male nurse seemed to hesitate a bit and motioned him to wait in an isolated room. In conclusion, older gentleman has a toy shoved too far up his butt and started leaking onto the floor. And that, kids, is why you always use flared bases.
Parents need to teach their kids these things.
I had a pay-the-bills type job as an administrator at a private hospital. We had an urgent referral come in for a testicular ultrasound, and the guy whose testes needed to be checked was quite a famous actor and was performing in a play in town, so the schedule for booking him in was really tough going. So I was skipping through the next 2 to 3 days of appointment calendars and looking for a free 10-minute slot or a before-lunch slot that was filled but likely to run short, so there'd be time to speed him in and out. He was on the phone while I was trying to book him in, and I got so self-conscious at the long silence, after explaining the normal waiting times and what I was doing, that I said, all cheery-like, "Don't worry, we'll squeeze your balls in here somewhere." I made sure not to be near the reception desk when he came in. "Okay, I for one would have appreciated your levity and attempt to lighten the mood, Mr. Hospital Administrator. I think this particular actor had no appreciation of comedic timing." So I used to always get pelinodal cysts when I was in high school. From between 13 to 18, I had it 5 times, which according to my doctor is a lot. These things used to hurt bad. I'd get them right above my tailbone and it would feel like the tailbone was broken. If I didn't get it dealt with right away, I wouldn't be able to walk from the pain. The last time I ever got one, it was horrible. It was Halloween and I was at my friend's house when I noticed it starting to hurt. I knew right away what it was. The next morning I had my mum take me to the doctor's office, but because it was a Saturday, my family doctor's office was closed, so we ended up going to a walk-in clinic. The doctor took a quick look at it and said it wasn't the problem and set me up for an x-ray. By the time the x-ray was over, it was hurting beyond anything I could imagine. It felt exactly like one of the cysts, but I trusted the doctor's word. Later that evening, the pain was so severe that I had to go to emergency. At the hospital, the doctor there took another quick look at it and told me it was nothing. He prescribed me some pain medication and sent me on my way. That night was horrible. I was terrified. I thought there was something severely wrong with me. I thought I'd cracked my tailbone after I fell over a balloon at my friend's house or something. On Monday, after a weekend of intense pain, I could finally go to see my family doctor. I remember the waiting room being filled with people. It hurt too much to sit, so I stood in the corner with my back bent weird because it hurt too much to stand up straight. All of a sudden, I felt instant relief, followed by a smell that was quite honestly the worst smell I'd ever smelled in my entire life, even to this day. It smelled like death. The people around me could smell it too. Everyone started coughing, but trying their best not to offend. I could feel my pants were completely wet with the pus from my cyst. When my name was called, I was so embarrassed. Everyone knew the smell was coming from me, and now they could see my drenched clothing. I mean, it was like I'd just dropped the top of my pants and the bottom of my shirt in water. That's how wet they were. The faces of the people were that of utter shock. They must have thought that I'd peed myself. Later in the office, the doctor took one step inside the room and said, "Ah, another cyst?" He knew just from the smell what it was. He took a look and said it was the biggest one he'd ever seen. He signed me up for surgery. Before, I'd just gotten little surgeries just for him to pop the cyst, not a surgeon removing the skin around the area so it would never return. And I've never had one since. On New Year's Eve 2001, I woke up with an unbearable pain in the left side of my abdomen. I couldn't move for over an hour. I was at home from my sophomore year of college, but none of my family was home. After about 3 hours of crying and doubled over in pain, I crawled across the house and called my mum at work. She took me to the ER where they did some various pressure tests and listening and decided it wasn't my appendix, so they did some x-rays. The only other person in the ER was an old lady that had a cut on her head, and she was trying to comfort me while my face was red and I was holding back tears. The doctor came in and looked at the lady and looked at me and whispered, "I don't know how to tell you this, but your colon is full of crap," the actual term he used. I screamed, "That's it? Get it out of me!" And he told me he could give me an enema, a suppository, or a salty drink. I took the drink and crapped for 8 hours straight. I was good enough to go to a party that night, but I still had the runs and didn't get drunk. I felt so much better. In conclusion, thought my appendix was rupturing, and the ER told me I was full of crap. After a rough night of praying to the porcelain goddess, also known as spewing my guts out, I discovered that most of the blood vessels in one eye had burst. The result was red where normally the eye is white, so I looked creepy as heck. The nephew told me I looked like Voldemort. Wife insisted I go to the doctor to get it checked out. So I did. I got a random lady doctor. She took one look at it and asked, "So, are you into any rough stuff in the bedroom?" To which I replied, no, not really." Her response, "Well, you should be careful with that choking stuff. It can be dangerous." I laughed nervously and the nurse kept staring at the floor and I proceeded to explain that I'd been vomiting all night. Even as I left, she said, Well, just be more careful next time. Oh yes, and the best part, this was in Provo, Utah, 99% Mormon and apparently home of rough, strangling nights of passion. Was getting a physical a few years ago so I could play high school football. Usually the doctor feels around your abdomen and that's that. This time the doctor made me strip and made me cough. I hadn't had fun with myself in a few days, and that with the combination of a stranger's hands on my beans gave me a semi, which I tried to cover, which led to me to accidentally toot on him as I turned around. The doctor looked at me and said, "You can play football," and he just left. I was 10. I went to the ER with a ruptured appendix. They had trouble diagnosing my problem and sent me in for an enema. The doctor was doing his thing. I said, "You must be the least popular doctor in the hospital." Well, yeah, I don't get many thank you cards, that's for sure. I recently had a sore throat, and when trying to get a good look at it in the mirror, I noticed these large pink spots all over the back of my tongue. I spent a week fretting over it, wondering what they were and why they weren't going away, until my mum got worried enough about them that she went with me to the doctor. Upon examining my throat and tongue, he pronounced that what I was seeing was my taste buds. I've never seen my doctor, who's an incredibly stoic man, smile so wide before. My family is never going to let me live it down. Went to the doctor when I was about 8 months pregnant. At that point in my pregnancy, I was very gassy, and if I tried to hold it in, it would get painful after a while. While I was sitting in the doctor's office, I felt like I had to pass wind. I held it in for a while, thinking that if I did do that, the doctor would be in at any moment. 15 minutes passed and nothing, so I decided to let it go. The tiniest little toot ever, but it stunk like something crawled up my butt and died. 30 seconds later, the doctor walked in and asked me what that smell was. That sounds like what happens to me in any given situation where I think I'm alone, and you have mine and presumably many listeners' sympathies. Had nasal polyps removed. When there are a crap ton of them, after the procedure there are several follow-ups to get minor stragglers, but mostly also to remove giant blood clots that have formed. My otolaryngologist is busy digging and scraping and scooping, and some monster fricking aliens are being dragged out. I can see my nostrils expanding like I'm passing a chicken egg-sized baby out of them, and they sloop shut again. Anyway, he's grinding and yanking at this one and it won't come loose. He rotates it a bit, gently places it in a tray and says nothing but leaves the room with a half smile. 3 minutes later, he comes back and tells us he had a silent freak out and had to wash up, because a giant bloody string of snot carried elasticity from the pull and slapped up against the length of his cheek like a cheap 25-cent toy from the bins at the front of a Kmart. Getting my very first pelvic exam. First, the doctor was nervous, so she dropped the speculum, getting it out of the package. Hands shaking and everything. Okay. I'm on the table, speculum inside of me, and doctor and the nurse are hanging around my lady bits. I'm trying to pretend that I'm not here when the doctor goes, "Are you on your time of the month?" No. Why?" "Oh." In her nervousness, she'd been way too rough and made me bleed. "Thanks, doc." Massive hemorrhoids. Went to the doctor and he had to stuff my butt back inside my butt. Had to lay on my side for 3 days. I was having a lump on my nuts checked. I described said lump to the doctor and he went about trying to locate it himself. I was lying down at this stage, staring at the ceiling. After about a minute of him fumbling, he admitted defeat and asked me to find it. So I sat up and started to jumble them around in my hands. I was hunched over and he wasn't more than a foot away, staring intently at my jewels when suddenly a gust of wind blew the door wide open. Just then a nurse walked past the door. That was awkward eye contact. What are some of the creepiest mental conditions you've ever encountered? A lot of people know about phantom limb syndrome, in which someone continues to feel as if their limb is still there after it's been amputated, often in great pain. Another interesting one that not many people know about, and is almost kind of an opposite, is body integrity identity disorder, which is when a person has extremely strong feelings that one or more of their limbs doesn't belong to them, despite being functional, and often they really want to amputate. From their descriptions, it seems that it's actually very psychologically painful. Sometimes to the point where they will self-amputate because no doctor is willing to amputate a healthy limb. I once read a short, fictional story where the narrator is talking about the terrifying, deformed growths on his hands and is frustrated that everyone is downplaying his worries and pretending he's normal. Eventually, by the end, he decides to deal with it himself, and he uses power tools to remove all 10 of the disgusting growths.
This sounds slightly like what I experienced a lot going through puberty. I felt as though my member wasn't actually mine. I had thoughts constantly about wanting to try and get rid of it with a pair of gardening shears, but I could never actually build up the willpower to do it. I never felt actual physical pain from it, but I remember lying in bed at night in emotional and mental pain, trying to figure out why I was so uncomfortable with myself. Eventually, by the end of my sophomore year of high school, I was able to accept that even though it may seem like it isn't an actual part of me, in reality, my member was mine, no one else's, and that's how it had to be. This was only accomplished by losing my virginity.
I've never heard of anything more psychologically incredible than a fugue state, when the mind can't deal with reality, so it just creates an entirely new world for itself to live in. Or you just need time to deal with Tuco. A friend of mine is suffering the Capgras delusion. We moved apart several years ago and hadn't been in touch very well. I know she had gone through some stressful times. I had a couple of phone calls with her where she was worried that her computer had been hacked, but she seemed reasonable. Then one day she called me and told me that her husband had been replaced with an imposter. She wanted me to fly to visit her so I could see him with my own eyes and confirm for her that it wasn't really him. Talking to her is simultaneously fascinating, unnerving, and heartbreaking. The worst part is, while she's clearly not correct in her beliefs, she is quite consistent in them, and they are utterly real in her mind. Imagine how freaking terrified you would be all the time if you were certain that the most important person in your life was a stranger with mysterious, nefarious motivations. Imagine going to bed every night next to someone you thought was out to get you. Imagine spending all day desperately trying to find your husband because he must be out there somewhere, right? Oh my gosh, imagine being the husband. I did talk to him for a while. He was unbelievably stressed out. He was doing everything he could for her. Meanwhile, she treated him like a stranger. That is a rough deal. In some ways, I can't think whether this or a terminal illness is worse for someone's family when it happens. I was in a psych ward for depression, and my roommate was terrifying. She was schizophrenic, depressed, and also probably just kind of weird. She punched herself in the face constantly while whispering to the voices in her head. She also used to sit in the multi-purpose TV room, TV, games, fridge, etc., on the floor and flicked the bean. Like, a lot. But she never stopped whispering to herself while she did it. I woke up to tinkle one night and she was just in her bed, staring blankly at me. She was moved to a long-term facility on my third day there. Oh god, I had a similar experience with my roommate. He was this really big guy, very nice and well-mannered. He'd tell us and the doctors during group therapy about how his mother didn't care about him. He told sob stories like many people there did, and it was sad but not unusual. Then one day, one of the doctors mentioned something about a certain medication he was taking, and I recognized it as an antipsychotic. It turns out he was a paranoid schizophrenic, and it just terrified me when I put the pieces together. And then I overheard his mother sobbing as she left from a visit and his father trying to calm her down and reassure her that he doesn't know what he's saying, and it wasn't his fault. Reactive attachment disorder. I work at a group home for kids with this disorder, and it was creepy before I fully understood it. Children who've been severely mistreated or neglected early in life often have their ability to form healthy attachments to caregivers or anyone destroyed. Some of them would cling to me, call me mummy, beg to come home with me 30 seconds after I met them. Others would refuse to talk to anyone, hurt themselves and others, set fires and act out any chance they could. Sometimes they would improve only enough to be sent to foster homes, only to have their behavior come back worse once they were placed in an unstructured family setting. It's extremely tragic. I had, or have, I guess, this disorder. I've grown out of the destructive episodes and bullying, but I still don't really have any relationships with people outside of my work or family. It's scary to look back on it now because I could have wound up in adult prison, but I used to lay awake at night and think about how I could manipulate the staff at my group home into killing each other. They were like Iago-level schemes. I figured out who was screwing who already didn't like each other, etc. I was even worse in foster homes. I bullied other kids for money and stuff, ran away constantly, stole everything I could get away with. I stabbed an adult in the leg when I was 10 because he called me a craphead, which admittedly was accurate. I also tried to do the deed with all of my foster moms and pretty much every other adult woman in my life. There are so few reliable long-term studies on RAD. Existing research suggests kids do grow out of it to the point where they no longer fit the diagnostic criteria as adults, but it still impacts their relationships. This is one of the reasons I think it's wrong to even suggest a child has antisocial personality disorder before age 18. Once you have that label, it sticks, and if a kid thinks they're born bad, they're more likely to act that out. I'm really sorry for what happened to you. It's not your fault, it's a normal reaction to the abnormal situation you're put in. I spent some time in the group homes and foster care myself, and it's what caused me to study psychology and social work. You're already ahead of the game by being so self-aware, so please don't give up continuing to heal. Oh, I have one. Now, nobody's been diagnosed with this in 40-odd years or so, but it's still taught in most undergrad courses because it's a really good example of culture-specific disorder. It's called Wendigo psychosis, or Wendigo, Wetico, or Wintico, and here's how it goes down. You're a young male in an Algonquin tribe. It's been a long, cold winter and your whole tribe is starving. You and your hunting partner have been out hunting for moose or deer or even a bear if you have to, but you've totally struck out. You're starving, he's starving, and you've seen the way he's starting to look at you over the fire at night. So you do what you have to do before he does. You kill him and eat him. You know what happens when you eat another man, but you're starving and it's cannibalize or die. So you eat him, and the Wendigo comes and possesses you, because the Wendigo possesses everyone who eats someone else. And now that the Wendigo has possessed you, you're hungrier than you were. Hungrier than you've ever been before. But the only thing you're hungry for is more people. So you go back to your tribe and one of two things happens. One, you tell someone and they attempt to cure you by having you eat melted bear fat until you vomit the heart of ice you now have because you're a Wendigo demon. 35% of reported cases were cured by this method. Or two, you don't tell anyone. You go back to your tribe and attempt to kill and eat a family member. You'll eventually be stopped and killed during your murderous and cannibalistic rampage, and your remaining families will burn your body and scatter the ashes to prevent the Wendigo from possessing them too. The other 65% of reported cases. In conclusion, Wendigo psychosis is when you think an Indian demon possesses you, and then you try to eat your family. Fatal familial insomnia is pretty freaking scary. Suddenly you just start not being able to fall asleep and you're gone within 7 to 36 months. You gradually lose the ability, along with a number of other symptoms over time, until eventually, at the end of the last stage, you'll not have slept in a long time. You'll be hallucinating and suffering from dementia, and eventually, you'll die. Only 40 families, about 100 people, have the disorder. Also, if you have it, there's a good chance you'll have kids by its onset, making the disorder pass down even further. Scary stuff. Diseases caused by prions are really scary. Every one of them, and all fatal. This is one of the most fascinating things I've heard about, and a single gene is responsible. Split brain syndrome. Sometimes as a means of treating severe seizures or epilepsy, surgeons will sever the corpus callosum, the connecting tissue between the two lobes of the brain. The good news is that future full-blown seizures are limited to one half of the brain, leaving the patient aware and able to take precautionary measures. The bad news is that thanks to the lateralization of function, there are essentially two minds in the skull that can each only react to certain forms of stimuli. Patients usually develop workarounds, though. The weirdest part is the occasional outcome of alien hand syndrome, in which one of the brains takes control of one hand and uses it independently. When questions are presented to the controlling hemisphere, the hand can write out its answers, which is sometimes in disagreement with the main brain and the patient's spoken answers. It's been a while since I've studied abnormal psych, so the details might be a little fuzzy. This sounds like something we would ridicule in the future, like we do with some of the medical practices of the Middle Ages. Nurse here. First patient who thought she was the devil scared the crap out of me. You eventually get so used to people who think they're the devil and become numb to all the weird crap they do. This seems like the opposite of the scenario of multiple people with messiah complexes being kept together. What a perverse and, of course, tragic situation. I live with a longtime friend who I'm convinced is developing or has developed disorganized schizophrenia over the past 3 years. It's not as crazy or mind-blowing as some of the other ones in this group of stories, but it is truly messing up his life and making it exceptionally hard for me to tolerate him on a daily basis. More bizarre than anything. In the past couple of months, especially, he's exhibited extremely antisocial and disorganized behavior. Everything from inappropriate emotional reactions to regular life events, to an inability to form complete sentences or thoughts in a conversation, to plain old just messing around with people by not making any sense, sometimes on purpose, and sometimes unknowingly. He used to be an extremely personable guy who could just approach anyone and make friends. Now he literally can't hold a conversation, but he still wants to be really approachable and personable, but doesn't realize that he actually creeps people out so much that they will passionately avoid talking to him again. The most frustrating thing that he does is basically attaches to me whenever I'm at home. He'll stand at my bedroom door and watch me do my homework, fold my laundry, clean my room, work on my computer, build Legos, etc. He will always be in the same room as I am unless I've shut my bedroom door. He mimics my actions, wakes up whenever I do, goes to sleep whenever I do, always wants to cook or clean wherever I am. I essentially have to find things that he can't or doesn't know how to do to get some freedom. It's mostly me because I've known him for way longer than my roommates, but when I'm not home, he does all of this to them as well. I think this all stems from his inability to make basic decisions, like when to eat or where to study, or when to leave in order to be on time for something. This extends to almost every aspect of his life. I've been seeing a counselor to consult with her about it, but it's basically impossible to know anything for sure, because she can't tell me any information about him or his visits. He started going as well. I don't know if he goes to them unless I ask him, and there's no telling when he'll forget about a session or just decide not to go to the doctor's evaluation. It's even more frustrating that his counselor keeps telling me that I shouldn't keep reminding him of these things or keeping tabs on him, because eventually I will be like a mother taking care of an infant child. My words, not hers, and she is right, but it is upsetting. Weirdest part, he's studying behavioral neuroscience. In conclusion, I've been friends with my roommate for over a decade. In the past 3 years, he's developed disorganized schizophrenia right in front of my eyes, and there's nothing I can do about it. He's echoing, repeating your behaviors and actions as a way to cope. Some will do it in conversations as well, latching onto a phrase of importance and repeating it. The rain is really bad today.
Yeah, the rain is bad.
It's a sign of cognitive impairment. Your story is sad. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm a psych major, so not a professional, but in my opinion it is catatonic schizophrenia. Those suffering from this type of schizophrenia, although in the DSM-V they're getting rid of the different types of schizophrenia and there'll just be one classification, will sometimes be unable to speak or move. My professor worked in a clinic while in school and told us of one patient who would suddenly lock up into extremely awkward positions and not move for extended periods of time.
This used to happen to a friend of mine. He passed away 3 years ago, and it was absolutely freaking terrifying. The first time it happened, we had no idea what to do, so we just called an ambulance.
I'm sorry to hear that. I can't imagine how it would feel to witness something like that and have no way of explaining it before a diagnosis. Another scary part of mental illness is that more often than not, those who are suffering from the condition, whether it's schizophrenia or something else, will oftentimes not even notice it themselves. I spent a week in a mental ward. I had depression and I'd told a cop I wanted to take my own life in a fit of rage. The hospital I was at was divided. One side was Group A, folks who needed treatment but were considered safe. Group B was the folks that had to be watched more closely. About 2 days after I was checked in, another woman had come in too. She was also placed in Group A and was placed as my roommate. At first she seemed nice and normal-ish, but after a few hours her stories were getting mixed up. I mean, she came in, found out I had a kid, and then said she had a daughter as well, who lived with her mother-in-law, or something. After dinner, the story was that her daughter had been lost after being brutally murdered by her father, and that the woman didn't even care. I voiced my concerns to the nurses, but I was just told to go to bed in the same room with this lady. It took a while for me to fall asleep that night because my sleep schedule was all sorts of messed up. I think I passed out around midnight. We were put to bed at 8 p.m. I'm not sure how long I was asleep for before I was woken up by my roommate strangling me. Now, we were placed in the last room at the end of the hall, far from the nurse's desk. Plus, I was being strangled, so I couldn't even yell for help. I thought I was going to die, but I'd fallen asleep with a book. So I bashed the book on my roommate's head and booked it out of the room. The nurses probably thought I was the super crazy one yelling at them. I'm not sure they would have believed me if it wasn't for the fact that I had hand marks around my neck. My roommate was transferred to the other side of the ward, locked up with a limited time out of her room. I never bothered to ask what her deal was. I don't want to know. I had a new roommate by the end of the day, a really nice older lady who was a lesbian. I told her about crazy roommate number 1, and we would just shoot the crap for hours at night until I was ready to pass out. What reason is there to have roommates in a psych ward? It sounds like you're asking for trouble. Yeah, I thought so too, but everyone on the safe side had a roommate, only had X amounts of rooms. If the second roommate never came, I would have been alone. Only us 2 chicks on that side the whole time I was there. It must be because of the money, because my friend had to go to an institution when he was a teenager and was thinking of taking his own life, and they didn't even let him talk to his roommate. It sounded like prison and it made him more depressed. He also had a 9-year-old roommate who'd attacked his mom. They made the kids go around and say why they were there every day in the group therapy, so every day everyone was reminded about what that kid did. My friend's mom took him out after a week. The big difference with these things lie with whether or not it's a place where the patients are there voluntarily.
When I was checking myself into the psych ward last year, depression, wanting to hurt myself, my doctors told me not to go to the hospital that has non-voluntaries. That's where you're going to see the horrifying roommate stuff. Unfortunately, I would say a good number of people don't have a choice though.
The scariest thing I know of is locked-in syndrome, where you're completely awake but unable to move. People assume you're a comatose vegetable when you're really just paralyzed for decades.
Not the same thing, but similar. My mom was having open-heart surgery when the anesthesia wore off, though she was still paralyzed, so she could feel everything. Apparently it didn't hurt too much, but was scary as frick. Happened 2 or 3 times, I think.
There's an amazing film about this condition. It's called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, a true story about Jean-Dominique Bauby, who was the editor-in-chief of Elle magazine until he suffered a stroke that led to locked-in syndrome. The film was adapted from a book that he wrote using only one eyelid to communicate. That's a grim fate to be sure, although that's the norm in this story grouping. Your psych evaluations are just as important as your medical checkups, folks. I'm a paranoid schizophrenic. I don't believe there's anything scarier on the planet than an episode. Nothing is more terrifying than being betrayed by your own mind. The things you hear and see, it's awful. I'm a psychology major, but this story doesn't have to do with my schooling. To put myself through school, I worked as a receptionist at a swimming pool, and Thursday is the day when individuals with disabilities and mental disorders come to the pool with their workers. I was on the other side of the counter helping the individuals into the changing rooms, and one of the clients grabbed my hair and started screaming at me that it was too beautiful and she needed to take it. One of the single most upsetting moments of my life, because after her worker managed to get her to relinquish my hair, she just continued to scream wordlessly until I was no longer in her sight. Wife is a psychologist. She says shared delusional disorder. Woman and her mother had paranoid delusions about mom's ex-husband and were convinced he was stalking them and breaking into their house. The ex had gotten the woman's son, aged 6, a modeling contract, and they thought that every picture of a kid in a magazine was him. The images that didn't look like him, they claimed were photoshopped. This was so weird and creepy since 2 people shared the same delusions. Psychologist here, work specifically with kids with degenerative or developmental disorders, and in my day I have seen some crap. There is nothing creepier than something called happy puppet syndrome, aka angel man syndrome. It's a disease most commonly found in children where they always have a happy effect, even when they're upset. And to top it all off, their motor skills are affected in such a way that their limbs move as if they're on marionette strings. There's a condition where people believe that their life is like the Truman Show, and that nothing in their life is real. I think that's creepy because there's no way to convince them that they're not part of a TV show.
Yeah, this happened with my ex-boyfriend. Not exactly that it was a TV show, but still thought everyone in the entire world was watching him. Really scary stuff.
Happened to me on a bad substance trip. Didn't help that I blacked out and came to in the backseat of my car at sunset at the beach, not another soul in sight. For about 20 minutes, I thought I broke the illusion and now I was going to live forever in an empty simulation. Friends weren't answering my calls or anything. Way messed up. When I was younger, I was a pretty unstable kid, which led to multiple stays in a youth psych ward. One of the times I was in, we got a boy who looked like a 14-year-old fatter, paler, creepier Jack White. So we find out that he threatened to kill and eat his school principal, which even to a bunch of mentally ill teens was psycho as frick. I felt bad for him because obviously he was messed up in the head, way more than us at least. But he would say all of these awkward things trying to be funny that ended up sounding like serial killer quotes like,
"Do you ever wonder what it feels like to be dead or eat someone?"
Which especially to the girls was freaky as F. So after my roommate gets out, I hear that this Hannibal Lecter wannabe is moving into my room. It's weird, but I just brush it off. I was 250 pounds and 5'10", and he was just him. And every once in a while when he made a messed up joke, they would just pull him aside and tell him to chill out. But one day I don't see him, and one of the doctors calls me in. They tell me he's in his own room in solitary now, and they pull out his notebooks and it's filled with drawings of me while I sleep. Fantasy drawings of him doing the deed with me, killing me, eating me, and pages of ramblings on how he would F me or how I would taste. It's literally the entire notebook, front to back, filled with these drawings and writings. I'm so petrified that I don't talk or leave my room for days. He apparently got sent to a long-term center far away, but I ended up staying even longer since they thought I would try to self-delete over that. But that's the story. Never saw or heard from him again. Still think about it all the time. It's hard to sleep around other people anymore. I was once in a party and joined this group of people, of which I knew just one person. He introduced me to the others one by one, and when I arrived at the last one, Noah, I shook his hand and petted his shoulder. He grabbed my arm and flipped it around and almost snapped it. Needless to say, it was the most awkward situation in my life, and even thinking about it makes me grind my teeth. I learned that Noah had been in Afghanistan and he freaked out when something or someone touched him from his back. It might have been post-traumatic stress disorder, or he was just hypervigilant. Don't forget that hypervigilance is necessary to keep one alive in conflict. The saddest thing is the high number of servicemen who are returning from war with these sort of mental problems. At least now they recognize PTSD as a real problem, so better debriefing can occur when servicemen return, or early intervention support can be provided, unlike the Vietnam vets who had to suffer in silence for decades. But unfortunately, the soldiers still aren't receiving the level of help that they need to deal with these sorts of issues. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.